I asked Bill Garrison to come here and to be here first to go over the Parks and Recreation suggested discussions for fees. One of the things that we looked at was some fairness, some consistencies. How are we using our buildings? How are we charging for it? Who are we charging? What's the philosophy? What's the thought process? Bill comes with an extensive background from recreation and had some ideas on some things that we would suggest to the board that they consider when we look at fees. And so that's what we're here to do today. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill just to go over some of the things that he was considering when he was putting together suggestions for uh, perhaps some changes to the fee schedules for parks and recreation use. So, Bill.
Welcome. Welcome back.
So the fee schedule, one of the things I ran into in here over the past 7 months was an inconsistency of how fees are applied to different groups. My experience has been with the municipality is that you either have a fee and that fee is applied to everyone, or you don't have a fee and then there's no fee for everyone. That you can't distinguish between two. Although if it's not a resident, you can have a different fee. So like with our recreation for a program fee, we have a fee for village residents, and then there's a 20% increase for non-resident. But the village resident fee is the same for all residents. So when we're looking at rooms at the community center that different groups are looking to rent, uh, parks, there is either there are no fees established for some, or there are some fees established, yet they're not fairly applied across the board. So what I'm looking for is some direction and which way we should go with this is that should we have a philosophy of that for example, the community center rooms are available for the public, for the residents at no charge, or what I have here is a proposal of look at of a very nominal fee for some of these so that it is equal across the board. So for example, if you're looking to rent the art room, which is a very large room in the community center, it's $25 for 2 hours. So that's really what I was hoping to have a discussion about and get some direction of the board looking to go forward. There are some other fees associated with the camp, and that was really the only other increase of fee that was what do you know, or the other was looking at when we have incur overtime costs for our parks department or recreation staff when we are assisting in events that are not village events. Should we be charging those folks for the overtime that is incurred during those events?
Can you explain, give us an example of what you're talking about?
So if there is an event going on in Market Square and there are tables and chairs that are needed and it's on a Sunday or after hours and we need to have park staff to come in to set up or take down, remove garbage. Could be in any of the parks, could be any of the facilities that we might need that's after hours. We might need staff assistance. So we've run into that on a few occasions where there was an event this fall in Nelson Park um, where we had to have two staff to come in at the conclusion of the event to clean up the park and get the park available so it was ready on the next morning for use for the public.
When we bring staff in after hours, we do have to pay them time and a half. If it's on a Sunday, we pay them double time. And there is a minimum of 4 hours that we pay them, regardless if they're here 15 minutes or 4 hours. So it is a cost consideration. That's one of the reasons why we were asking if we should have fees for all of these things and for special events. We certainly want to encourage people to have events and to use our parks and to do things in them. But the question really is, should the cost of the overtime personnel and the use of our materials be borne by the taxpayers.
Were you done?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I in 20, where's my memory? Mayor Garrity, um, 2015, I did a whole presentation about a special event permitting, because just as it is when it comes to our public spaces at the community center and also our parks, when it comes to special events, we also have a very um, we're very inconsistent with how we go about um, the permitting and access of those. So I think that like I was looking here, you know, you had a TBD at Market Square, right? So it's really having that conversation again after this budget process, really about what is our special events procedure, permit, however this board wants to call it, and how we need a system, just as we do right now with our parks and community center, that it's a system for all, so that same rules apply to everyone. So, having a discussion about what it means to be a nonprofit entity, having a discussion about what it means to be a for-profit entity, a private business. Just like when I had and when I had Ossining Summerfest, we were a private entity, so we actually paid for everything, police, and we paid for garbage, and we had our own staff there, and Village didn't pay for anything, right? So depending on who's having events on public property, right, having the office of the village manager and yourself would know that from the initial. So even before we even approve any type of event, whether it's done by a church, a nonprofit, a school group, a business, you would already have in front of you what the needs are, what it's going to cost, what it consists of. And right now, we really don't have that. Um, as far as the other fees that I saw, pool rental for up to 25 people. What's the fee to rent the whole pool? Is that even allowed?
It is. We do it. There's been no established fee, so that's what I'm proposing. So to rent the entire pool for 3 hours would be $150, 100 depending on the number of people you had. So the $150 for up to 25 people.
We actually have, unless I'm looking at
Yeah, because I see
120, yeah, it was 150 for a party,
Right,
and then
Oh,
100
pool,
for
I'm
the,
sorry.
up to 25, and then $5 for each additional
Right, so
person
the-
above 25.
Yep. So the pool rental's for $100 for 2 hours, up to 25 people, and then $5 per person on top after that, after the 25.
That sounds ridiculously low to me. And I've rented pools before, municipal pools. I mean, that's like a bargain. That's like a really like. I mean, the fact that you're having private access, either part of the pool or that's just my opinion. When it comes to, I mean, because that's now for a whole different purpose, right? Exclusivity in the aquatic center for yourself or your group.
Yeah,
Right.
how much of the week is actually available to be rented?
Very little.
Oh, see, okay.
So I think what's helpful for me is just really understanding the fees. So, for example, um, if we are renting the basketball courts, who's actually renting the basketball court? What do you mean by that? Like, what is the difference between me going to do a pickup game versus me actually renting the basketball court?
So it's the exclusive use of the facility. So if you wanna have you're running a men's league tournament or a pop-up tournament, and you want to make sure that that court is available for you on that day and that night, then that would be a permit that you would need. A fee would be applied for that.
And how did you come up with these fees?
I,
Like, was it like, was there, because I'm sort of getting to Trustee Herrera's point. The minute that something comes that the public cannot use, right? Like, to me, that yeah, I don't want to have a fee where to the point where I say, hey, if I want to start the Quantum Basement Basketball League, because I'm all about basketball, right? I don't want it to be
Bad example. But
but I don't want it to come to a point where I couldn't start my own league, but at the same time, do you feel that these fees balance out, you know, the desire to maybe create more
So I,
fraternal, fraternal leagues versus a corporation that may want to come in? Like so that's I think that's what I'm getting to. A corporation versus regular people. Like, are you making that distinction? Or are you just saying this is just a flat fee?
no, I'm look two things. One is the question about should there be a fee, and if there is, having it a very low fee to make it accessible for people. I've had, for example, some residents that came to me during the fall looking for soccer fields. They were just dads that had kids in their neighborhood. They wanted to get a field because they were doing some soccer training. The fee for that field is $50 for 2 hours. They said they couldn't afford that. So, looking at some of the facilities that we have is that's why I went through and said, okay, let's take a look at some of this and have it as a very nominal fee, very, very low. But it is something that if we do say, yeah, we're going to charge people for use of these facilities, it's something that people still can afford, but everybody pays the same price.
And so for the gym, if they want to rent the whole gym, it's $100 for 2 hours
Correct.
for the whole gym.
But I think, to be clear, if I understand this right, it isn't that I call up and I want to rent it on Wednesday at 7 and you will rent it to me. It is only if there's no one using this, there are no programs. This is the extra, it's the margin. It's not going to get rented out if it's being used by a league that got some permit to use it on every Wednesday at 7 or the school. This is the incremental pieces, right?
That's correct.
It doesn't undermine if you have free swim on Wednesdays at 5 to 6. You're not renting the space on Wednesday. You're not renting the pool Wednesday 5 to 6 because on your computer it says that Wednesday 5 to 6 that's free swim. It doesn't become open market to anybody that wants to rent it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. So this is only the marginal availability kind of space that's it's probably a lot also to do with some of the rooms, the multi-purpose room, when they're not in use on a schedule.
It's excess capacity, right? Really is what you're talking about.
For the gym and the pool, yes. For the rooms in the community center, there is more availability. I hope that with increased programming, they become less available, but there is more availability for those rooms, and they do get utilized by a lot of different groups currently.
Yeah, so that's kind of my point. So the comprehensive look at just any space in the rec center, regardless of its scheduled programming or not. Who are they? Are they nonprofits? Did they ever submit an application? Did they ever submit insurance if need be for an event or depending on what they do? It's current people who use the center right now that I think we're having a conversation about. Should these people be paying fees? Should certain nonprofits not
Is that
pay
what you're
fees?
asking? I didn't hear him ask.
No, I think it's if the Girl Scouts come and want
Yeah.
to use a room, do they pay a fee,
Or are they
But-
exempt?
or is it? And so does the Coast Guard come in and have their meeting, or the Friends of the Aqueduct? Do they pay a fee?
Right.
And if the Girl Scouts don't and the Coast Guard doesn't, should anyone else?
That's my point, right? Having a comprehensive, the easiest way that I would put it is that if you're a registered nonprofit and you could somehow, in your own terms, if you could have a verification process, and obviously if I come in from like a private business, then obviously a fee would apply to that, right? But that's kind of because you're saying that right now we don't have that, and I know we don't have that because I experience it when I go there all the time. So it's really so you're suggesting this. So then on January 1st, everyone who uses our facilities currently and prospectively will know our new regs
We'll
for
have to pay them.
yes. Okay.
I'd like a little help understanding how this would be applied going forward. And is there a distinction that can or should be made for organizations that are active 501c3s, or if to me, it has more to do with what is the intended use of the space. If I'm not interested in renting it to people who are, trying to make money. I should correct. If you have programming, then that's a whole negotiated contract thing. They're charging a fee for programming, and Great.
Right.
Happy to see more of that happening in a way that is, at a level that's accessible to our community. But if there's a community, like a group of people in the community that want a space to be able to meet, to learn something, to talk about something, um, are we charging for that? I mean, you're proposing that they would be charged for that?
I'm proposing that either you cannot you cannot have one fee for one set of group of people and another for another, and a non-fee. So it's either got to be a fee, which if we go for the fees, these are the recommended fees, which came up as just being very nominal fees that make it accessible for people, or we say we're not going to charge fees, and then we could have a fee for non-resident.
How,
That my experience, that is the legal way of doing this.
I see a big difference between renting the pool and renting the music room. And the music, I'm just using that as an example, or the art room, because those are used for programming when you have programming, and the more programming that we have, the less available they'll be to any community group to come in and use the space. But the pool, as Trustee Herrera was commenting, that's a real commodity, and not only is it not very available, but there are competitive rates for that. And anytime we take it away from being just open for open swim, then we should be making sure that if we're taking away access from our community members, we at least compensated for it. Does it make sense to distinguish between something like the gym or the pool? And I don't know what the lifeguard's fee is. Is that always go along with any of the pool rentals?
Yeah, so that would be additional. You'd have to pay the
Okay.
lifeguard.
To me, those are really special items. Whereas the rooms, I don't. I mean, maybe because I've used them for various groups, it seems like if the building's open and they're not going to be utilized, otherwise, it's just not the same to me as the pool and the gym. I mean, and I recognize that the rate is different as well, but I know I feel like we're kind of nickel and diming people here, and I'm not sure that it's costing the village a lot. But my other question is when we're talking about parks. So Market Square, a lot of times what Market Square is used for is for community rallies and events and public speech, and people get permits so they can, and we just changed the whole process to make it more streamlined. It can go right through the staff. We don't have to approve it. So if somebody wants to gather and make a big public statement and invite community members to join in and express themselves, it now costs $50. If we pass this?
If the philosophy becomes that you're going to charge, if you're not going to charge, then there would be no fee for anyone to use it. Or there would be if you're going to charge, again, you can't charge one group
Yeah.
and not charge another group.
I think we all agree with, yes, let's have something we can consistently apply.
Okay.
I think we do agree
So
with that.
so the recommendations for the fees are, if we're going to charge, these are the recommended fees. If we're not going to charge, then you can take those off.
Well,
Oh,
no, but there's a. I'm sorry.
Oh,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. So, Big Gary, you kind of hit it on the head. It'd be helpful to go kind of. I don't need to go line by line, but with respects to Market Square in particular, that is the one that actually gives me the most angst, right? Because I believe that it was designed with CDBG money, some years ago,
Mhm.
and it was supposed to be public space and it was supposed to be a public gathering space. I do believe that a lot of these we could charge for, but when it comes to Market Square in particularly, I believe that should be open to the public because of how we use that. Because it's supposed to be a place where you can come and it can be a gathering. For me personally, charging to make a statement, to just meet, like, and then it just doesn't feel right for me. But I'll let others weigh in.
Yeah, I was gonna. So, you want direction. You've actually laid out 3 different pieces, which I'll reply to. I'm just gonna make sure. The different groups, consistency, but we have the right to say so. Market Square is off the table because it's a gathering place for rallies, but the others you can charge. So I'm going to go through what you asked, right? So strategically, there seems to be consensus that we should charge fees. The pool is really tricky. I don't even know why you have fees on it because I can't imagine ever being available, frankly.
The
But
pool
you
parties
do.
definitely happen.
Pool parties and are really expensive in the open market. Really expensive, and there's a lot of wear and tear and all sorts of stuff. I actually have no interest in going line by line. I'm sure others do. For me, not. When we have to pay overtime, so I think that there's a cost to doing business. When you have to go overtime, philosophically, I think that should be borne by the people who want it. If you have hours, people that want it beyond those regular working hours that now costs um, a different kind of price that contractually we have to pay, that should be paid by the people who need it for those hours. So you asked a question about that. Market Square off the table for me. You do, I think we need a place where people are allowed to gather, rally, etc., without going through how many and how few. For me, the rooms that are being used, a nominal fee is probably fair. I think you will get a lot of pushback from organizations that have been using them every third Monday, every fourth Wednesday, because for them that is their public space. I mean, sure, they could use others somewhere. I don't know where, because apparently the library also now charges. I have no idea what the school is doing. So that you may get a little bit and probably needs a little bit more what you consider a nominal fee. I think will probably cover the amount of hours spent on the phone organizing and scheduling people renting. There's actually a cost to all that, the garbage pickup and all that. So I'm actually okay philosophically with nominal fees for rooms. For me, I'm just answering questions. I have an issue with resident versus non-resident because until you're able to actually figure out residents and non-residents, I don't know how you manage that in the parks because I could always find one resident and then have 50 people use a facility who don't live here. And, we don't live with borders. And so we have neighbors who don't allow anybody except their own residents use the parks. So they overflow from Connecticut and from Briarcliff and from across the river and from everywhere but loose. And yes, it's a philosophical issue. And the mayor and I have had these conversations because we don't agree on it. But I think when you do resident and non-resident, how you manage that, I'm not clear. So I'm not. It's not the fee part.
What do you think? What do you think? What did you just spoke for
I-
me? What
No,
do I not
because
agree
you
on?
and I have had a conversation. I don't believe that we should allow people from Briarcliff who does not allow residents from Ossining to use the parks. I don't believe that.
We do
You-
definitely disagree.
I
Yeah, I
know.
didn't realize that you were actually
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it should be there should be reciprocity for villages and towns that don't reciprocate. I don't think that their people should be here. We have a philosophical difference, but that has nothing to do with the fees, in my opinion. You're saying to us resident versus non-resident may be like a different fee structure. I don't actually know how I feel except that something's not sitting right with me because I don't think you can prove who's a resident or not if there's 50 people showing up on the park. If one person that filled out the form happens to live in Ossining. So I think that's like a challenge for you and how you then go out there on a Saturday afternoon and who's on duty to go and check who's using it. So that's an implementation issue that I don't know, not a fees problem for me, but implement how you're going to manage that. I'm not getting from this. So that to me is a challenge that I'm not seeing a solution for unless, and I don't remember in the Parks and Rec committee that we've solved for that. And you had one more question. Oh, the profit and not-for-profit. So you really feel that you cannot distinguish that a group or is a group. A non-for-profit, a for-profit, it's all the same. They do not have, you can't have different pricing for
The
them. So the
municipality,
Girl Scouts and the camp, the for-profit camp that wants to use whatever, that makes money on its campers are the same.
the municipality that I worked at previously, the legal opinion that they got at that time was that you cannot distinguish. You cannot give one rate to one group and another rate to another group because then you are gifting the service.
Between a
As a
for-profit and a
discount.
not-for-profit. And did you
Yes.
ask the attorney for the village the same question?
We've had some discussions.
And is that an accurate statement that we cannot have different pricing for for-profits and not-for-profits?
I don't want to state it now. I can't tell you without going into
Okay.
further detail.
So that might be a little bit up in the air if we ask that question. Philosophically, I think there should be different pricing for for-profits and not-for-profits. My opinion. If you say you can't do that, then I don't have an opinion anymore. It's whatever we're told it is. So I think I
So-
answered. Did I answer your question? I think those were the
Yeah.
4 things that you guys asked.
I think that if I could just clarify, the fees are if you want to use something exclusively for your own purpose. Market Square, I certainly understand because if you're going to have a rally or something, anybody in the world could come in and be there, so there wouldn't be a fee for that. And I don't really know how you would block off Market Square to make an exclusive use. So I certainly understand your thoughts on that. But like Henry Gordian Park, you know, there's the restaurant wants to use it for a wedding, so they're looking for exclusive use. I mean, it's just an example. So would we charge them a fee to use that park because they're looking for an exclusive use, which means they're
Are they
not going to
charging
let.
the people to use the park. Are they charging the people having the event?
Yeah, they are.
Yes,
they are.
absolutely.
Yeah, that was actually a rhetorical question. So
Right.
I think
So
Yeah.
you know, again, but we need to have a fee
I
established.
get it.
So that's
So there's a
why.
whole bunch of questions here.
But it's really about, do you want to use it exclusively for your own personal use, and what would I charge you for that, other than just, I want to go to the basketball courts and we're going to do a pickup game and anybody can join in and it's a lot of fun, because you're not going to charge anybody for that because you want them to use the parks. And I think the fee schedule really is for exclusive use by an organization or whomever,
And as John said, for excess capacity.
or excess capacity. Correct.
It's just add to, there's also the groups that want to use, what if a group wants to use Market Square for fundraising or a park for a fundraiser?
What's the rule?
But then we don't have one.
We don't
now.
have
There is
one.
none. We don't have a rule.
So for me, it would be helpful to understand. Oh, it would be helpful to understand the legal opinion versus non-for-profit or for-profit, or whether someone is actually using, the facility to make money or not. Because I agree with Rika that is that to me that makes a difference. If you listen, if I decide to rent a music room in the community center and charge people $500 per person to come and attend a fundraiser or whatever the case may be, then I think there should be a fee definitely associated with that. That may not be just $100, whatever the case may be. So to me, that kind of makes a difference. When you talk about just help me understand, what do you mean by general parks areas? Because so like in Snowton there are grills. Is this fee saying that we're charging people to use the grills, or it's just
No. So like Henry Gordium is a great example of the restaurant using it as a wedding, a non-for-profit using a park to do a carnival.
okay?
If you want to use Snowden, for example, someone going in there and saying, hey, we want to use this whole playground and the grills because we want to have a family reunion. Is there you want the exclusive use of a large area of the park, not if just you got a family that's going down there and just going to take, and the park's still open and anybody can go use the playground or the basketball courts. This is just for if you want that park to be your own for that designated time period.
All right, so now there's already kind of a fee for the grill use, right? Like, don't you have to pay a certain amount if it's over 25 people? Don't you have to get like a kind of permit?
That's at the town parks.
Oh, that's just town parks. Okay.
Have that here. I just want to say that I would love to know the opinion. I'm pretty sure, but I don't want to speak for them, and I'll check it tonight. But I've seen other municipalities, whether they call it nonprofit or private or exempt verified organizations or non. I think that should really lead the conversation. I mean, what are our parameters to say you are exempt from paying at all, right? Why should you be getting public use of a facility for free? That's really the conversation. And the fee structure is subjective if it's a special event, right? So at Market Square, I agree. It should totally not even be on the table. That's on a per case. That should be a special event application, which is separate from the, with you and Bill, right? Because that may actually be an event now, right? So that's separate than. So I just wanted to differentiate those items, and lastly, I believe that this is finally going to give everyone an opportunity and us an opportunity to really see, who is using our spaces. Because a lot of them, as, Rika mentioned, are civic groups, committees and commissions and the Coast Guard and the this and the that. Um, but in an effort to really have an equitable operation, I think I really appreciate the fact that you propose this. I'm okay with this fee structure. I think that the pool rental area is very, very low if it's ever available, as you said. But this is all subjective because we don't even know. From what it sounds like, the board isn't, and please correct me if I'm assuming wrong, we're kind of okay with, I'll use the word exempt right now, exempting organizations that we feel are for the public good that aren't necessarily, however you want to define nonprofit or public groups. It sounds like we don't want to impede from that from occurring, but um, you know, I think discussing the different types of programming. If someone has a class that goes through a whole different channel with Bill. Now it's a program, and now it's a contract. So this actually won't apply because that may actually be a whole separate. So I think it's important. The programming is separate, special events at any of these locations is separate, and then the public use, dividing it from nonprofit or private. We'll use those two terms for now. It's really those three areas. I know it sounds very complex, but they are separate, and the processes, from my understanding, are separate as well.
Explain to when you say events. You're saying somebody gets an event permit. That's different than if the Little League is running.
Yeah. So for example, Austin Matters, a group that we all support. We would be stopping our programming that morning to allow them to have the gym. So that would actually have a special event. I'm assuming we wouldn't charge them, right? Because they're a nonprofit that is in our community, right? But stuff like that, legitimate organizations that bring a lot of people, that already have an event going on. So it really is on a per case basis. And as far as staffing goes, that's where it gets a little touchy. When is it okay to? So let's say Austin Med is a great example. Is there staff that's used for that? Are we okay with that? Are we not? That's just an example, by the way. But that's where the per case examination from your office and Bill would have to go. Hey, listen, the board said that they're exempt because they're this and that. So does that mean that now they can get this and they could use our projector and they could use our staff person and they can clean up and they could, right? So what the parameters for that would be.
So for something like the gym, because the gym is used by our senior citizens during the daily, and then there's open gym. So when would someone actually have the opportunity to actually rent the gym?
So if we, anytime that we were not going to be programming it.
So during open gym, would open gym?
No, that's a program time.
Okay, so that's the program time.
Yeah, I know it
Yeah.
sounds confusing. Open swim, open gym is on their calendar
Okay.
as a scheduled time.
There's like short windows between the major youth sports and adult sports seasons where the gym is less utilized. I just happen to know one woman who wanted to plan her son's birthday party, and there was like, okay, there's this one day where you can have it for 2 hours. It's
Okay.
not something that comes up that much other than for events.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I don't want to. I'm sure there's a million other things that happen that you're aware of.
The reason I think we need to have a fee, even if we believe it'll get used, there'll be an availability
Yeah.
for about 18 minutes in the year, is because when you don't do that, the people who want to do their kid's birthday, they look for where there's empty spots. So you have to sort of make sure that you have a policy in place,
Gotcha.
because if a room's not available, now they'll go, oh wait, isn't the gym available? Why don't I? So you have to be able to say, yeah, but you can't use that. I mean, there's got to be sort of a platform. And look, I know the not-for-profit's complicated. We have a lot of not-for-profits that have a not-for-profit status. Now we ask them to prove that they're not-for-profits. Not so easy from some of them, right? And then even if they do that, they charge, right? So sports, I mean, a lot of sports things are not-for-profits, but they charge just like a for-profit. They just charge less. So I know it's not like exactly straightforward. Some not-for-profits are one thing, and every not-for-profit can only become a not-for-profit if they can prove to the IRS that they're serving for the better good of something. I mean, it's really not so easy to get a 501c unless you fill out that you're doing something like that. So I think it's tricky.
Yeah, let me
It's
say
tricky.
the reason why I'm not like why I push back a little bit about the nonprofit status and for-profit status. Okay, I'll take the example. I have two children that play competitive, highly competitive soccer at a ridiculously young age. One of them is part of a not-for-profit. One of them is part of a for-profit. They both cost me a ton of money, and they are both very different than when they played ASO and their coaches were volunteers. So when you're talking about a youth sports program that is a bunch of parents volunteering and giving hundreds and hundreds of hours of their time, I would not like to charge them. I am much more comfortable charging either of the programs that is charging my children thousands of dollars to become world-class athletes in elementary school. You know, that's to me that's very different. That and but one of them's for profit, one of them's not for profit, but they're the same. They just have a different legal status. But as far as their function for our community, they're much more similar than either of them are to ASO. And so I assume that these fees are not intended for the youth sports organizations that are a bunch of volunteers.
No, so the recognized youth sports organizations they have
They're
they're
nonprofits,
not
aren't they?
they're not what
They're nonprofits, aren't they?
They may
already?
or may
they
not
are.
be.
Yeah, so
They're supposed to be, and so they're not charged for field use. And if they were going to have a meeting in one of the meeting rooms, we would not charge them for the meeting room as well, because they're recognized youth sports organizations.
So recognized youth organizations do
I would
not
just
pay
put it under
any of these
nonprofit.
fees?
All right. So
But it's
the
not the same. It's
so
not
the
the same.
recognized youth organizations, they wouldn't be charged for a room,
Right.
but we would charge regular residents for a room,
For private use.
private use.
Correct. If you're going to charge fees.
If you're
not,
going to charge fees.
right. If you're not going to charge fees, then you don't charge fees across the board.
That's an easy one, right? No fees means everybody
Right.
doesn't pay.
But if we are charging fees and you have a youth sports activity that wants exclusive use of our gym, then we would charge fees to that organization. That was our discussion.
Right.
So
Well,
that's a yes or a no. Because
So,
on
because
Sundays we were
He's
talking
thinking.
about that.
so Sunday's a whole different ball game because we don't have the facility open on Sunday except for a couple of hours during a first open swim. So if someone wants to come in, we're going to have a staff person there, and they want to use our facilities. So we would propose that we charge them to use the facility, and they pay the additional cost for the staff member to be there.
Isn't that the same as saying it's overtime? So
'Cause it's
I
double
am
time on
proposing
Sundays.
an agreement that for overtime and extra staff for stuff that we do charge because it is beyond the regular hours. Now, I would like to sometime in the not too far distance consider having a 7-day community center. If we go in that route and figure out a way where it's not double overtime and all that, then it again will be, then that is the regular hours, 7 days a week. And I'm not saying here that we are now doing 7 days, but if at some point it would still apply because now it's not overtime, right? If we ever go to an actual 7
If we can go to a 7-day, we're open.
and we're not
right?
paying extra for those days,
That would be correct.
right? So I think for any time beyond the regular hours, it should be borne by the people using it.
Well, that's
Speaking
a
for
policy.
me.
No, well, the thing is, I actually agree with the concept as a policy decision, which is part of the reason why I feel like if we've got a room that's not being used and some group of people in the community aren't going to make money off of using it, I don't think $25 is a token fee for a group of people. I mean that what's nominal to some means it's inaccessible to others, and those are people who probably don't have the organization to have go through the. I mean, becoming a nonprofit is not a nothing thing. We got a lot of them in the world, but it's a lot of work to get them, and so so I'll tell you the things I'm uncomfortable with, or I'm not seeing as much justification for, and I see just in my experience that there are people who are going to be disadvantaged to this, and I don't see a lot of justification for it. It's the music room, the art room, multi-purpose room. To me, I think the gym and the pool are very special facilities, and it makes sense to have a fee, whether this is exactly the right fee or not, and you might want to juggle it next year. That makes sense. Sunday is a very special case for this year. We do not have contractual ability to have regular staff on, so we know that if we're doing it, we have a dollar amount that it will cost to staff it with overtime hours. And so any organizations that are deemed to be appropriate for using that space on Sundays, particularly in the wintertime when the fields are not as accessible, because we want our community to remain healthy and active. That's like, I'm completely in agreement with what Trustee Levin is saying. That's a really specific instance of overtime fees that is not being borne by the whole community, and it's for exclusive use. So that makes a lot of sense to me. When you're talking about events, I assume that's, there would be specifically negotiated, well, the expenses that may be borne because it's on a Sunday or because it's at night, we're going to have overtime. Then is that done on a case by case basis, or can we? Does it say anywhere in here when you have an event that is going to require staff to work overtime that that your village is compensated for that?
We don't have a special events procedure at all. I mean, I know that they call you, and depending on what they're doing, that you'll just help them out that way, right? I mean, that's always how it's kind of been here in the village, which is why I said earlier that it's really I think a conversation outside of budget times for us to have, because there's a lot of policy in place that I think will actually have to be discussed with it. That's
I'm
all.
totally supportive of having more, and I think Bill is nodding his head. I think everybody would like to have a more consistent, clear policy for events.
But just to get some clarification, because I'm trying to follow what you were saying. So, you said you understand the fee structure for the gym and the pool, because they're for specialized use. But so the other rooms, let's say going forward, you could just go in and get a room, and if you say you do good, you're good.
Well, what would be things that we don't think are appropriate for the usage? Like, you should not be using it to sell things. I mean, what is not considered an appropriate use of public space?
So I can share a couple things that have come up. So a condominium board wants to have their annual meeting. So it's a private organization. It's not a non-for-profit. They want to have a room to do their annual meeting. A dance company, for-profit organization, wanted to use a room to have their meeting. So those are just some of the things that come up. So that we're like, do we charge for that? Do we not charge for that?
That's
They're
use.
They're village residents. They're looking to use the community center. So those are some of the those gray areas that come up. I mean, I think we also have if somebody's coming in and they're going to be looking, they're doing it trying to sell insurance to seniors. We can have some discretion on who we approve or not approve to use some of these rooms for things. But for some of the groups that are in the community, it's a gray area, and we have to. I think to be fair, it has to be one way or the other.
So, philosophically, if a room is sitting there, I don't see it as not being used, and therefore people can use it. There is wear and tear, there is staff that's necessary, there is all of the building stuff that doesn't happen, depending on the usage in the building. It's the parking lots, everything. Everything has wear and tear, and I think that these are actually, from what I remember, pretty nominal fees. The question starts being that when people, I think, so there are the people that just want to meet. I mean, first of all, condo board and all that, they should, I mean, it's a private, they can meet at their own place, or they can go pay a restaurant for the space, or they do it on this and they should pay. So I don't think the for-profit is for me, is not an issue. But it's the non-for-profit. So you've got the people who just want to meet somewhere. The library's booked up. They don't want to go to a restaurant because they don't all want to go and eat and all that. So where do people like that meet? To have a space. I think that's a challenge. The not-for-profits who currently use it, and they're there on a regular and ongoing basis, and there are a few of them, right? Or organizations and all that. I think that's a challenge of what you do with them. And where do they meet if they don't have this space to meet? And they probably are mostly Ossining residents who meet there. I mean, that I think is the biggest challenge. So you've created a nominal fee. They're currently using it. You're going to have to say to them, now we're charging you. You know, honestly, I don't even have an answer for that, except to agree with you that you can't be put in a position of saying who's a better organization than others. And there are a lot of companies, including Weight Watchers, which is a for-profit business, by the way, in case anybody forgot that, that uses places like this because they sign up because they're having a meeting or they're doing a fundraiser and everybody brings a can for, but they're not doing a fundraiser. They're a private industry that's on the stock exchange, and this is just a way for them to get people. But how can you make that decision? Right? So it's a very, because when you got the request, it was somebody who said to you, oh, I'm having a little meeting where everybody's going to bring cans of food for the needy, and we're just going to meet and learn about it. Or we'll learn about our financial well-being by whatever. Right? I mean, I get those all the time, and they're oftentimes in community centers and in public libraries. And now you're being put in a spot, and you're looking to say, you guys need to tell us so that we have a policy. This is the policy. That's what we're doing here tonight. So I think it's a bit tricky, but I think we have to solve it.
Maybe to your point, what you said, like, you know, the groups that should not be charged, like an ASIL, if we do get the clearance, and I don't know what the opinion will be, but if we are allowed to somehow differentiate nonprofit or exempt and private, we would still be protecting those groups, right? I mean,
I think when I don't know. I mean, if they, I think when we were talking about Sundays, using Sundays
Yeah.
as an example, because it's a very specific one and it's one that should probably be figured out yesterday. Having use of the gym on Sundays, whoever is using it, I think they have to offset. They have to make the village whole
Right,
cover
only
the
for-
cost.
only on Sundays.
Yes,
Yes,
just for the Sunday
okay.
thing, or maybe I don't know, how much. I mean, that begs the question. Like, okay, let's say you have vets. Upper Vets is lit. They have night games, and a lot of that's going to happen after hours, and it's softball leagues. Somebody's making money off the softball leagues. There's, it's soccer games and stuff. Is staff required to work overtime for that field in particular? And we already charge
No.
more for the lights. But
No, we have
Okay,
run the
okay.
timers. So.
So generally, just as these teams are functioning regularly, even if they have games on the weekend, that's doesn't matter. We're not sending people in on Sundays generally. So there's not the only time that those teams would potentially be costing taxpayer dollars specific overtime hours is the potential for the Sunday. Is that right?
Yes.
Basically, I mean, I don't know, like if there's a baseball tournament that takes
Right, that's
place
what I'm
on a
thinking of,
Sunday
the
or
Little
something.
League parade or
yeah,
something
so,
like that.
right.
It's,
Yeah.
usually it's during working hours. We have staff that work on Saturdays, so it's kind of
Okay.
incorporated in. So.
Okay. All right.
I think that's why he's asking for a philosophy, because he can always say and make an exception. A game ran late. Somebody had a party. Something happened. Some political issue came up and the training, so instead of Market Square, they need to come in. You have a discretion. You're always allowed to say, look, there was a particular situation. I think we have to be cognizant. I'm just worried about the 5 or 6 people that want to get together. They're not a not-for-profit because they never got one. They live here. They can't go to a church or a restaurant, whatever. I don't know why, but there are reasons like, what do you do with people who want to meet somewhere that are residents who, and so like, how does one deal with that? Although I like to follow the 80-20 rule. I don't think you have policy and philosophy based on the exceptions. You do it based on the majority and then step back and say, what do we do with these scenarios? Is there just one room we don't charge for? So, and is it first come, first serve? So the people that know to do that book it for the whole year and nobody else gets it. Like, I think you have to, I'm not here to work that out for you, but you do have a committee that can, right? So your advisory group can help with this. But there is that balance in general. I think the fees for me work, and I think we discussed all the other stuff. I don't need to repeat it. So I don't know if you're walking away with more than you had, except that we have to figure out that nonprofit for-profit scenario.
So for me, I was under the impression when you first brought up the conversation that everybody was getting charged, and that would include recognized sports organizations. And so my concern was also about the resident, just the regular person who's walking about who wants to meet something, like who wants to just to meet. Um, I would definitely be comfortable with this if everybody is getting, there is the music room, which is like $15. So I mean, if
Now
we're
our fitness center,
Have
So-
they done the work?
Dance studio, it's almost done.
dance
Almost
studio.
done, yeah.
I'm just
Right.
saying,
Yeah.
so if we are charging the regular, like if you know Miss Sally wants to come in and she wants to do tea, she's being charged $15. I think everyone, you know, whether you're a recognized athletic group or not, should be charged the $15 because I'm just imagining whether you're ASO or not. I mean, if it's 10 kids, someone has $1 each versus the regular resident. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm thinking about ASO is an excellent
Uh.
example. We have hundreds of kids who participate. It is so bare bones. There's $0 for staff. They pay for uniforms for like 4, 5, 6, 10-year-old kids to be able to just have an experience learning how to play on a team sport. And the Little League Baseball is that way too. At some point, they get to a point where they pay the umpires, but it's usually like 12-year-olds who are umping for 10-year-olds, and they're getting paid like $25 a game. And the fees that the families pay for to be able to participate are so low. It's great for Ossining. And if there's going to be an additional, I mean, you're talking. I don't know. I don't know. It's
no, no.
like I like that those are really accessible for our community.
I mean, I kind of get both. I mean, what you're saying is that it should be equal to all, whatever we do. It should be fair to all, right? But what you're saying when it comes to actual access and making sure that people can actually stay in these programs and operate them, we could set it up as part of the conversation that if you're a nonprofit and that the fees really, really, I mean, it's so nominal just to make sure everyone is going through the same process.
I'm just going to push back again a little bit on that nonprofit thing, because when your coaches are volunteers, it's your neighbors, it's people who are volunteering, they're doing all this training in the free time, and then you can be a not-for-profit legal status and you are paying professional trainers.
Mhm.
And
Making money.
and to me, they are much more different.
Yeah.
And I'm much more interested in saying that because also when you have volunteer coaches who are from our community, that they're running programs that are not costing us the same that they would if we had our staff running the programs. If like rec basketball, well actually you have some, so that's a hybrid. You have like some staff that are managing it, and then you have parent coaches who are working with them as well. And that's more village staff on the clock for that program than we have for all these youth sports that are entirely volunteer.
So I'm talking about
And rec, we're paying the staff, and they're not paying to rent the space.
Yeah.
So if it doesn't matter, so if we're saying that these groups need to use the meeting room or the music room, then how do we say, like, how do we draw the distinction between, the random resident who just wants to use a room for an hour or 2 hours?
I don't think I'm happy with not charging for the rooms.
So just not charging for the room.
But I don't know if I'm in the minority there, but I see the rooms as.
Or do we just want to make
Is there wear and tear? Yes, but you know what? I think
I don't know. I feel like
accommodate the wear and tear of chairs and tables.
I actually agree. I'm just not troubled. I'm just in the middle because we're a little behind when it comes to how we operate municipal buildings, when it comes to programming, when it comes to space. Most places have, whether it's a nonprofit or private rule, you have to go online and register your nonprofit or your community group or your private group. There's a registration period. There's a review. There's and not to say that the centers are free for all right now, because it's not. But I just feel like we need some sort of structure that really sets everyone on the same page. And what you said is right. I agree with you. But does that mean that now, if I could prove that my nonprofit or my community group, it's not a nonprofit, we have volunteers too, and we only, then you really are saying, what, the community center is a place where we believe, which I'm not saying it's wrong. It's a case-by-case basis, and it does matter what you do or who you are. And we have to, and that will impact how we offer you space or not. That's just...
So this is what it comes down to what we view government as, right? Like, do we have community spaces? If they're for the community, everyone pays to live here. Someone is paying someone, right? So if you're paying someone, and everyone's tax dollars, whether you pay rent, whether you're a homeowner, if it's a community center, it's a community center. But I think the problem that we're having right now is really deciding, because if it's, oh, this is a volunteer group and everyone's volunteering, and so that means no one can pay, the $100 for the 2 hours, but or whether it's the meeting room, because it's really the meeting rooms that I'm really thinking about. I'm not really thinking about the gym. But no one can pay the $15. Then why charge the $15, right? Because it's not like the $15 is actually covering the costs. So I mean, what's the purpose of the fee? Because if we had to really walk around and say, hey, you know what, this amount of cleaning went on the floor. This is the amount of people who actually folded the chairs. This is the one who put the table up. I mean, I don't know.
Well,
Are we charging for the cost, or are we just charging just to charge?
I think we're charging for, I don't know if equity is the right word, but people have been treated differently based of who they are, what they do with the community center when it comes to renting rooms. That's why we had the history there. It does matter who you are when you go there to rent a room. It does, and what you do, and who you know, and who you speak to.
But
Okay,
even in this process, we're actually
so could there be a criteria where, hey, listen, if you're not charging and you guys can afford it and you're exempt, the village will, you could rent a room. Is that even an option, Debbie or Bill? Or back to Victoria's point, listen, you're all volunteers. You're all we know who you're serving. We know your program. You're exempt. Is that an option? I don't know what to go.
Well, again, I think it's, if people want to walk in and the homeowners association wants to have a meeting and there's a room that's open and nobody's using it, go in and have your meeting. It's, but if you want to have a room where you can close the door and no one else can come in and it's exclusive use, again, that's where I go back to, should we be charging? So you're asking for this space, no one else can go there. If you're having a meeting and let's say we divide the space downstairs,
Multi-purpose room.
the multi-purpose room, because it does have the folding thing, so you could divide it into two spaces. And they have the round tables and they're really nice. Can people go in there and sit and have a meeting? Absolutely. I don't think that we're trying to eliminate that, but if you want it all for yourself, and what if two groups come in, and they want to sit at different tables? Can they do that? And three groups, it's almost like, the new shared spaces. You could come in, you have little areas, and you can come in and you just use them. Should those people have a membership and then get it for free? So they have a membership card and they can come in and use it I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, but again, I don't think that we're trying to exclude somebody from just walking in and having a meeting or sitting around and talking and stuff.
Okay.
Again, I go back to, if you want that room and you want to be able to close the door and exclusively for you, then you should pay something. And I think it's a nominal fee. You're right, it's not going to cover the cost. But it's like a reservation.
Okay.
And it also allows you to know who's in the rooms, what they're using it for, and not just sort of show up and not just say I've always been here on whatever day of the month it is. Because there is wear and tear on all this stuff. And we don't know I mean, we went through this actually, where even all of these teams, it turns out, don't exactly monitor and vet what's going on. Surprising to us, right? And so even having to fill forms actually became a big deal, because when you charge, you actually do require people to fill forms and somebody becomes responsible. Isn't that what happens when people pay something? I believe that there is cause and reason. I actually think that what you're presenting to me is very fair and square. What we should actually be doing is saying, okay, where might there be exemptions? We already all agreed right away, Market Square off the table. So that's like bam, right there. We all seem to think, look, there are issues with non-for-profits and how they function, well beyond our realm, but let's at least say whether we believe there should be. If legally they can't be. I mean, I feel like we have come up with some pieces, and yeah, I think there will be situations where we're going to sit here this time next year or in 6 months and review this and say, we thought this, but it turns out. But I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with sitting here 6 months and say, we actually hurt certain groups that we didn't mean to, and made it an unviable piece. The way it's working now, you could argue is working just fine, but I would argue that it's very all over the place. I mean, I don't know if I agree with Omar's point about it's who you know and what you know and all that, but I can't agree or disagree because there is no process. I can't even come into a meeting and say, no, that's actually not what's happening. It's all legit because I have nothing, there's nothing to work with. And so I think paying the fee and making someone responsible, like when you rent a Brighter Park for a birthday, you know, the person who pays is responsible for a whole lot of stuff, including if people get crazy or there's liquor and things. You know, when you pay, you become responsible. And I think that is actually another advantage of this whole thing. And I agree that people who live here do certain things, but I actually don't know that because I've never actually seen anybody in the community center walk into anything that I've attended and ask for people and where they're from and who they are. I went there and somebody was hiring a bunch of people, not necessarily from Ossining, for private industry, and they were using it for free, but nobody asked them. They just walked in.
So
So I really want this to be part of it.
So I have a question. You had mentioned the condo association. I definitely agree with condo association. How many people though? How many people are they bringing in?
Condo association?
Dozen,
Like dozen?
yeah,
Like 12?
12 to 20 people.
12 to 20 people. So would it be easier to say like if it's
Oh,
10 and under? You know, like if it's really like the,
Oh, I see where you're going.
you know
I think I'd be interested to find out, are there communities that just say, you know what, it's a community center, it's here for the community. These are things you cannot, that it is not for. It's when, and taking out the legal definition of not for profit and just saying it is not a space that is utilized for, you know, soliciting customers or, you know, to sell things or to get people to buy shares in something. It's like I'm not comfortable with the community center being utilized for financial investment. Yes. You know, or to sell vitamins or anything else. Like I think that's a misuse of public space. But I don't know how often that happens. Those are not the events that I attend. But if there are, rather than setting a fee for the use of the space, I'm more interested in is the space being used as a community center should be used, and how do we define that?
So you do charge a membership to participate in the community center. Don't forget that.
Yes.
So in order for someone to come there and use any of the facilities for any reason, you have to have a membership card.
Just to walk in,
So
technically.
now we're going to invite people to come in and use our community center that maybe don't have memberships.
Well, I don't know if that's totally true with some of the groups that are currently using the community center if they are members.
It's supposed to be
But, I
registered.
mean, the membership is incredibly accessible. So I mean, like
It is.
I can't sign my kid up to be in camp if he's not a member of the community center, and then maybe that's one of our standards
Right.
as you're creating a more consistency in the system.
But that would only then apply to the person that is making the reservation because you're not going to know who else is
Understood.
attending that. But it's something.
So who was exempted from your fees, ideally? Were there any exemptions?
No,
Like for the gym or
what I was looking for was either there is no fee or a fee.
Are you asking currently or?
With the
no,
proposal.
like the proposal.
Proposal with a fee or no fee. And the only exemption would be the youth sports organizations who are currently approved by the Recreation Advisory Board and recognized on a yearly basis as the approved youth sports organizations.
But we have to be careful because they're typically using them on Sunday and we would be charging them the cost.
Right, but they use
Sundays.
the fields, so but they're not paying for all the ball fields.
Right.
I mean
So
that
they
that would
weren't
be
really
that
using
would
the
that would
rooms.
some they very rarely use the
Oh,
rooms.
okay.
But they use the gym for like
The
a couple
basketball
of times a year.
Project 105 uses the gym.
Okay. And that's on Sundays.
No, it's we are working on getting them more time. So we have Tuesday, Thursday now, and Saturday mornings prior to our rec league starting. Once the rec league is over, they'll go back to Saturday mornings.
Can I make a suggestion? This is something that we typically discuss as part of budget discussions, but point was raised to us that we can update the fees anytime we want to, January, February, March. This has raised a lot of questions just among the five of us, and I think it would benefit us to give the public some time to view this meeting, take a look at the proposed fees, and maybe give some feedback?
Well, and we can take some time to get our legal opinion on
Yeah.
charging of fees.
Yeah, we're not ready to take
Yeah,
action.
no,
Yes,
no.
we've got a number of things, but I would actively like to. I don't know what I mean, how much outreach should we do to say
Well,
we'd
I
like to
mean,
have your?
what person would be happy to pay fees? I mean, what is the question that you're asking? I mean, the truth is, if you do this, it's not that we're hiding anything. We're being very honest here. But people, when asked if they want to pay in focus groups about any product, never want to pay. I mean, that's always the answer. So the question is, what question is it that you want the public's input on? That whether we should charge fees for this, whether we should allow it to be used for. I mean, like, what is it that you want the public to comment?
Okay,
on?
that's worthwhile consideration of what are we asking the public to comment on. What I was going for was, I mean, I've talked a lot about my family's experience using the gym. I mean, some of us grew up in this community and used it as a young person or have different experiences with community centers. So those of us sitting at the table have our understanding of how it has been utilized or might be utilized. But there are 30,000 other people that might utilize it differently. And that many more questions or considerations that haven't been raised tonight. And we can't consider everything, but there are some groups that we know will be directly impacted by this. Or I don't know what the answer is. I think one question I would really like for us to come up with, and I'd be happy to solicit input from the community, is what should the community center and our public parks be utilized for or not? And is it appropriate to have them used for fundraising? I think nobody's going to say you can't have Austining Matters fundraisers in public spaces. But is it, I'd like to have a more clear line so that when the recreation staff is deciding if they're going to rent a space, whether they're charging for it or not, to an organization, that they have some clear parameters on what organizations they can rent to for what purpose.
So let me say this. I don't think, for me, everything here doesn't necessarily need a conversation because you've answered the question as far as like the basketball courts. I mean, that's exclusive use. I get that. The fields, exclusive use. I get that. I don't know how you.
Isn't this all exclusive use?
Yeah.
It's all
Parks
for
and
exclusive
Right.
use. Okay.
So and these are for people who, so I can, like, just for example, if I wanted to go to Snowden and I wanted to go down there and use grills, it's a first come first served basis, right? But if if I'm able to do that, I'm not talking to you. And if I use all the grills, I guess I'm okay, right? But but if I want to say, hey, Snowden Park, April the 21st, this is me, and Quantel's basketball tournament, then then
Event.
that's an event. So I understand that. So for me, the courts and I think the pool stuff is a little too cheap. I do agree with that. I think for me it was really the room. All right, if you've already said that we have recognized sports and they're exempt and that's been vetted through the rec advisory board, I don't have any children, so I'm not, if that's already what the policy is, okay. I think for me, it's really like the rooms, right? And so, and I think that's where the pushback is the rooms. And so, if it's a condo association, definitely I get that. If it's someone coming in trying to say, you should be here, this new network, multi-level marketing scheme, they should definitely be charged.
So,
Or
but
maybe
should they be
shouldn't.
charged? Yeah.
I don't think they should. I mean, listen, I haven't said anything. I've been listening to this for almost 45 minutes now. So I don't believe we're going to come to any kind of consensus tonight. I think that there's a lot of different voices that are being heard here and viewpoints, and many of them are very valid. But I think a good idea would take this to the rec advisory board and see what their thoughts are as far as
No, I
that's
think
concerned.
They did weigh in on it, right? The rec advisory board.
They did.
Rec advisory board was about for community groups that there would be no charge.
I mean,
What
I think so they weighed in. Okay, so that's good. We have a legal opinion that we're waiting for. We're trying to kind of bifurcate that. Find out like what's legal or not. I think for the sake of our sanity, that we should move on to the next thing. And let's have, maybe you can have another discussion in another work session. You could form a subcommittee. Maybe
But
two
you
members
have,
could.
but you have an
Hold on.
advisory board.
Yeah, I
Are
mean,
we?
can I finish,
Yes,
please?
yes.
Thank you, thank you. Everybody's been speaking for a while. Just let me finish. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna be.
Yeah, I
long.
understand.
Okay. Okay. Good. So, but I think we need to move on to the next part of our process, and maybe we can come up with a couple things we can agree to do to maybe craft a policy. Okay, that makes sense. And but I'm not sure we're going to get that figured out tonight. And I think it's great that the question got raised. Okay, because these things do cost money, and but at the same point, to the mayor's point, it's that what is the community center for? What does it really serve? Who are the people that we really want to serve, and what are the types of activities that should be there because the taxpayers have paid money for that? So I'll just leave it at that.
So the only thing I was gonna say is I was trying to figure out if we had if we could at least agree on the parks, because I don't like the people have an actual issue with the parks and the
They're not gonna.
exclusive use.
I don't even know what some of, I don't know what general park areas non-ball fields are. I mean,
Why don't
you
you
must
let
have
us
something
vet
in mind.
that out? Because we've got to get all
Yeah.
this other information, and I think that that's
Okay.
a
Yeah.
great suggestion. Let us get our stuff together. We'll do a little bit more research on pool fees and see if there's,
Okay.
if it's too low, and also separate out what are the facilities that you can do exclusive use for, and what would just be open.
That would be
But-
helpful. I'd like to understand that.
But we could also do a partial. I mean, this is not a kind of legislation.
Yeah.
This is like if we could agree on 50% of, if we can't agree on the rooms, so okay, we leave that for a later day. But if we
Right.
can agree on a bunch of other stuff,
Sure.
even the fees themselves, I mean, we could still pass that and do the other ones another if we wanted to. I'm
Right.
just saying. I'm
Right.
trying to be helpful here. I don't
Right.
know.
We can update the fee schedule with any piece of this that we want.
So just to be clear, Rec Advisory Board did weigh in on this, and I'm assuming they saw this proposed fee structure. Okay, so that's check. At this point, we're having an internal conversation with the board as to defining community groups, nonprofits, and waiting for legal opinion regarding even the legality of that. Was what-
For-profit versus
yeah.
not-for-profit.
and my colleagues, did I miss anything? I just wanted to make sure that I had a good.
So let's put it on the work session agenda for December 12th.
Okay.
And we'll
Sure.
pick up where we left off, and hopefully we'll have a little more information to go on then. And at that point, I think it's likely that at least a piece of this we can do an updated fee schedule in the new year, because I think there's some other fees that we will be updating that are not.
On the next page is just a couple of recommendations for lap swimming non-resident monthly fee of $15, and then for day camps.
Yes, with those are $15 increases to most of the day camps, I think is probably a good idea.
And a $5
That
for.
says 20.
Oh, that's
Oh, yeah.
interesting. That's bad math.
Oh,
I mean, our camp fees continue to be very reasonable
way low. Yeah.
compared to other communities. So I don't have any objection to raising.
What are the membership fee? I haven't gone one in ages. What's the membership fee?
$10 for
$10
rest
For what?
for a resident.
for a year, annual,
What about children?
$10.
$10.
And how long has it been $10? Because it's been a long time. Because that's what I paid.
I think
like,
it was
a long time
no, I
ago.
think it was $2 when I got my first card a dozen years
Really?
ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 1994.
No, we've raised the fees. We've definitely.
In 1994, it was
I think
Oh,
it's
that's
increased
valid.
500% since I got my first card.
So are you telling me that when people walk into the community center, they show their ID?
They absolutely do not.
Nope,
Okay.
that's all
Are they
part of the.
supposed to? I don't
No,
know.
we don't.
We don't have the
Can I
infrastructure
just
to make
say,
that
I'm not
possible.
being funny. I've gone in there in the evenings, or sometimes daytime and evenings, and community centers run very differently. So I'm not being funny, but is there a system where people show? Because I've never seen anybody show.
No, we don't. We don't have cards. We have memberships. We have cards for the pool. From my understanding, the cards kind of went to the wayside because if you were asking the 11-year-old kid to use got to have your card to get into the gym and he doesn't have it, you're not going to send the 11-year-old kid away.
Right.
The staff know the people that are using the community center, and we know who has memberships and who doesn't.
Okay. So that's a different discussion.
Yes.
And that, when we talk about the infrastructure to be a more secure
Yeah, yeah.
space, that's obviously something.
Right.
Right, okay.
Single entry points and things would
Okay.
be a little bit more control over
It
that.
comes up when you're going to sign up for a program and you realize your card expired.
Right. That's
That's
Yeah.
renew. Yes.
Yes.
Right. Thank you very much, Bill. If you want to roll right into the next thing, I'm just going to speak myself out.
Sure. I
Let's
Do we,
thought,
need,
break.
do we need a minute?
Just take a
Okay.
break.
They want
Everybody needs a
truly
break.
a brief break.
Okay.
Oh, Tom, there you go. We're still on fees, though, I guess. I don't know if you want to. And continuing our discussion about fees.
all right. Thank you very much. We're here to talk with Tracy regarding the fees for our planning department. There have been discussions about the fees that we charge and the fact that we changed our policy to make the applicants do their own mailings. So I really wanted to have the discussion with you on that so we could solidify that. Our fees, if you look at this proposal that Tracy put to this comparison, it's not a proposal, it's comparison, you can see that our fees are pretty low. When we start in to discuss fees for the building department, a lot of our discussion is going to be how much time does it take, what is the hourly rate that the village has for the staff and the employees. So when you consider the amount of time that the planning office is putting into an application and putting it through the different boards and the committees and all the work that they do, I'll turn it over to Tracy, but I think that our fees are pretty reasonable, and she has some ideas on how we might be able to lower the cost of the mailing for the applicant, and the reasons why we have the applicant do that now, so.
Sure. It was my understanding that we did raise the fees 2 years ago for all our land use boards, but even still, I compared them, our fees, and it's a little bit of apples and oranges because everyone does it a little different. Between the Village of Portchester and the City of Peekskill, there are two municipalities that we're often compared to as far as size and population and density. So I looked at some of those comparisons. We are, I think, a bit lower. And I also did the research on the mailing and the issue of mailing and notification. For any of our public hearings, applications, the applicants currently are required to send by certified mail a copy of the notice of what is happening on that property. So why it is done certified is we want to make sure that the person there's proof that they actually received the notification. If we don't do it by certification, then people could complain, I didn't get the notification, and it actually causes a lot of hassles. What does vary, and most municipalities do that, require certified mailing just so that there's proof of that it was sent. And I think Portchester may not have done the mailing, but they also do the sign on the property. So what I think we could do is we actually have a very large circumference that we require the notification go to, is that we can reduce that diameter and go with the sign, which many municipalities are going to. And you could also do notification different for use variances and area variances. You could extend the notification. So if you're just putting up, if you're looking to reinstall your deck that might have been within the setback, and it's something simple that maybe the notification doesn't have to go to 500 feet around your property. It could just be any adjacent property. The process for notification is outlined in the code. So anything that we do to that could possibly have us amend the code to change how mailings are done. It actually doesn't say that the applicants have to do it, just says that they have to be notified. We procedurally have required the applicants recently to do that.
Last year or so.
Just the last year, because it also takes a lot of staff time. I have one staff person, and for her to do all those mailings and do the labels, and that just takes more time on top of everything that we do. We do provide the mailing list because we would have to cross-reference to make sure that list, we'd have to do the list anyway, so it's better that we do the list. And we actually prepare the notice, which we hadn't been doing recently. I did reinstate that we are doing the notice because we have to compare and make sure it's correct anyway. We might as well just do it ourselves. So those are things that we do in-house. So I think I think the sign aspect is something that we could provide someone with a sign. We just put in a Sharpie that says there will be a special use permit public hearing on this date, and you have to put it on just like a real estate sign. It goes on the property, and or there can be even a smaller one.
No, okay, I'm sorry.
It's just, some people prefer that because then you do know that something's going on. It could just be for certain ones like a use variance or a special use permit. It's another way to do notification and maybe decrease the perimeter of how far we are requiring mailings. What happens is that if you have a condominium, there could be a lot of owners, and if you have to do 100 certified letters, that could cost you like $700. This could be very expensive. So if we could, I think it's something that we can continue. When we're going through the comprehensive plan process, we could also look at this as part of that, how we notify people through the land use boards. Yes?
Yeah, just to clarify what you're providing for the owner, you're providing them with the list of all the addresses that they have to send to, and you're providing them with the letter itself.
Correct.
Okay, and then they have to execute everything else. They have to do it by certified mail, and then they have to prove to you that those letters were delivered, correct?
Yeah, they have to give the return receipts and give that back to us.
Okay.
Correct.
So we actually have a record of the return receipt,
Absolutely.
request, and everything else?
Yes.
Or the verification that those letters were delivered?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I like Portchester's approach, and it's also relatively inexpensive for the owner which is put up a sign and first-class mail.
The first class mails that people say they don't get it, and we have no proof. What you could do is require an affidavit of mailing, which requires people to just get an affidavit of mailing. You actually have a piece of paper and you sign an affidavit that you, and get it notarized, that you did mail, to this list on this date by certified first class mail, and you testified to basically the fact that you did that.
But not by certified, just by first
No,
class
just by
mail.
first class mail. Yes, correct.
Do you have preference between certified or?
It's just
She
pretty
already said
clear
what
in her
she
preference.
preferred.
Right.
I actually do think that the certified is, and maybe making it just the properties that are adjacent get notified by certified mail, and then you know that they actually got it, and there's no discrepancy. And also, even if you do, mail can get lost. I mean, the one next you do get you have to sign for it, so there. Yeah, I do think decreasing that, if it was just the perimeter, you probably only have maybe 6 certified letters, if it's
Yeah.
just the adjacent property owners.
I think, to me, the most valuable thing is to have the sign, and not that I want to create more plastic corrugated signs in the world.
Right.
Believe me, but it doesn't cost that much money for them to have it done with simple type, and I think we just have a minimum size of letters and basic information that needs to be required. I'm concerned about handwriting a Sharpie on a,
Well, the municipality would do that.
yeah?
Yeah, I think we would give them the sign with the writing on it.
Okay.
That it would be part of the application cost. Yeah, you wouldn't want to have them and then make sure that, this way you know that
Okay.
it's been given to them. I wouldn't rely on them to have that, or and
Okay.
having a Sharpie. Jamie was a school teacher, she has nice handwriting.
But on a very serious note, given our mail. On a very serious note, given our challenges with our mail system, the past couple of, I don't know how you want to call it, though expensive, and I appreciate the fact that we're going to narrow down the reach, I kind of do see the importance of having it certified.
So there would be, how does everybody else feel about a sign?
Yeah, I'm fine with the sign, but I think for the properties that are adjacent, the properties that are adjacent, they need to get the certified mail. I mean, for the properties that are farther out, I could see a first-class mailing being appropriate. But I think that, you know, this is a litigious society. Somebody could claim they didn't get it and they didn't know about it, and that's going to create a whole, believe me, the extra money they're going to send for that certified letter is going to be worth every penny, you know, so that's.
People can sue us for not being notified that something's going to happen?
Yes.
People can sue you for anything, but.
People
what-
can
but
successfully sue us?
No. The fact of the matter is, what often happens is if you do certified mail, we don't always get all the green cards back. So we don't necessarily, we don't always get, sometimes they just get left on, the postman doesn't take them off. What we do have is simply proof that it's been mailed. That's the key thing, is that it actually has been mailed, as long as we know it's the correct address. It's beneficial if we know that the person actually signed for it, particularly if a person is saying they didn't get it. But if we have the list and we know that it went to this address, but under law, generally, if it's sent out in the mailbox, it's considered mailed. That's it. In other words, receipt is not assumed on the other side. It's just out. The certified mail is good, but it's only as good as long as you get the certified mail card back. And we don't always get the certified, and that's just because that happens. We just don't get them back. But we've required it, but as Tracy points out, currently, we require, I think it's a 300-foot radius.
It's a lot.
And I can just give you an example. When we were dealing with the group home on Rockledge, there was a massive difference in the number between 300 feet and 200 feet, because 300 feet took in all the condos there. And so the number was like triple what it was when we were at 200. And the village was responsible for doing that mailing, because it was our public hearing. So if you were to narrow that down and then potentially use a sign, and I think you may have seen it, the town uses it, Yorktown uses it, this particular piece of property is subject to a hearing before the planning board, blah, blah, blah. That just gives people, the notification. But the key in terms of it, and the affidavit of mailing is just, I mailed it, here's the addresses. You attach to that a list of every single address you mailed it to. That's generally presumed that it's, that you get it. I mean, there will be people who come and say, I never got it. But I should also point out, we publish it in the Gazette. It's out there. But if you have the sign, people are going to drive by and they're going to see that particular property is subject to something.
I'm a big fan of the sign. Big fan of the sign. I want the sign to be as visible and there for a very appropriate amount of time, so that anybody who's actually living in that neighborhood and driving down that street is aware of it, whether they get the mail or their landlord gets the mail. So I think it's really important to have the dual approach. I'm very glad to hear that. If we're going to continue to require certified mail, although it sounded like what you were saying is that the affidavit would accomplish the same goal. But
I think it does. I know Tracy likes the certified because then it's proof that the person actually got it.
There's been 2 times recently where he said, no, you got it. And, it does put something to bed where it can just delay a project, or cause more grief at the public hearings of people.
The more important thing is that you've mailed it. Where you have a problem is if the person's within the zone and they're not on the list and they didn't get the mailing, then you have a problem. But if you've mailed it to the person and it's out and it's certified and the person says, this is who I mailed it to, you have much less of a problem with, someone challenging it in that way.
And we could also step it. I do think there's a big difference between an area variance for a porch and a use variance to put in a gas station. So, there's just a big difference, and we could change or a special use permit, like your special waterfront permits, is make that, larger projects. We have a change in the fee that the notification could be bigger. Some also do postcards, and they're cheaper too. Like you said, we could have 2 levels. The immediate property owners get certified, and then a wider net could be by postcard of an official that this is the notice, the same thing as the sign that you'd get posted in the street.
People are actually a lot more likely to read it.
A postcard? Yeah. It's true.
So we're spending more money for the letter that's less likely to get read. Did you want to ask something, Manny? That microphone doesn't work. No. Tracy will generously share with you.
Thank you, Tracy. Good evening, everyone. So I don't want to keep talking about the issue of what happened, I guess, last year and how the policy changed in regards to notifications or anything like that. So that's, to me, That's something I still don't understand. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to figure it out, and I kind of agree and disagree because I have done something very similar to what it was brought up in regards to notifications in other municipalities. And what they typically do is they do the certified letter, and they do a sign. And part of the process, yes, I agree, the sign it has to be made by the village because it's certain language, and it's usually more like a standard sign, I want to say. But not only that, what I have done in the past does vary. For example, they do that a lot. They actually have to provide not just with the certified receipts that you get, as many as you can get for the date of the meeting, but you also have to prove that the sign was on your property. So you have to actually take pictures of the sign, because if you give a sign to someone and doesn't put it on the property, it kind of defeats the purpose of the notification. So there's other implements that, other areas where you can actually implement. But, the sign idea actually I brought up a couple of years back while I was on the board. And for me, for bigger projects, it gives you a different understanding for what that project is going on. And a small little sign, it won't be enough for that kind of
Oh, yeah,
project.
and
For example, in New York City, they usually put a poster in a
billboard
property
size, yeah.
pretty much and informs the community. And as it advances, through the process, you can change the modification of the dates. Something that, I guess as a general question is, couple general questions. How the village used to do the notifications the year before and the years prior to that? They did certified letters as well, certified mailing? If they did, I'm assuming that was the cost to the taxpayers as well. And if I go in front of either whatever, any of the land meetings boards that we have, if I'm postponed for the next month, do I have to do another notification of mailing? If I'm in front of the zoning board or the planning board for 3 or 4 months, do I still have to do notifications every 3 or 4 months? So those are questions I think that part of how we solve the issue, because there are applications that are in front of those boards for more than a year.
We
So-
don't require multiple mailings.
So, and I think that's one of the things that signs will be useful, because there are neighbors who said, I never got the mail, or I got it 6 months ago, and that project is still going on. So a big sign and a big project, I think, is essential for the community to be aware of what is going on in those neighborhoods. So, thank you.
25 years ago, when I was with the city of Binghamton, we actually, the village posts the whole agenda in the Gazette, and we publish that. When I was at the city of Binghamton, we actually used to give a legal notice, and each case would post that legal notice in the newspaper and have to provide that back. So although there might only be one mailing, the agenda is posted every month in the Gazette. So that's
Yeah, we know
This is
we
the
know we've more than
notification.
met our legal minimum, but
Right.
the thing is, most people, when something's happening in their neighborhood, a sign is a really
Right.
easy way to visually to see it.
absolutely.
What is? Are you familiar? Are there any communities in Westchester that have, let's say something like the Hudson Step or like Avalon, because that happened. That's if you put a little, 18 by 24 lawn sign in
Right.
the middle of what was BASF, nobody's gonna see that. But big developments of a certain size, should they be required to have like a big, 4x8 sign, like you do in New York City, like you see in New York
Sure,
City?
we could definitely look into the different types of signs and have it be a part of the application process. Like I said, I think there are some that probably, a deck probably doesn't warrant a sign and looking at the different levels of permits, we definitely look at the scale of the property to the scale of the sign. There are some that even it's just something that you can put on a telephone pole style that are much smaller. But I think the lawn sign that you use for political and real estate would probably be appropriate. Because you can do it even two-sided, but we can look into that whole requirements.
So this is everything else here is not a change in fee structure, the only change would be if we want to, the notification of public hearing.
Actually, That actually is not in the fee structure at all, the notification, that's actually in the code. So that's gonna require potentially amending the code. Although I think part of it is there is a section of the code that also says whatever else the zoning board of appeals thinks is appropriate of distance, so we could modify that. I know in the past, and I've talked to Jamie, I think that this has changed multiple times due to the impact on staff we're very small, so we're not like the city of White Plains or Yonkers that has a lot of staff to do internal things. It's myself and Jamie, so so I think that also determines on what municipalities do. So I think we've been trying to work this out to get the best notification and also do it as efficiently as possible and use our time as efficiently as possible to make the process smooth for people.
So we'll put some ideas together and bring it back to you and see what you think.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tracy.
All right.
Up, Debbie.
And last but not least
Good evening.
is
Evening.
Joe Augustinelli. We are here to talk about a different philosophy of how we charge for building permits. And one of the ideas that we talked about was how do we make this easy, fair, and consistent amongst everybody that needs a permit. And so the changes that are being recommended really looked at the amount of time that we spend on a permit. Can you get a deck permit for a flat fee as opposed to how much are you paying for it? And you know, one person puts on a deck for $8,000, another puts on a deck for $20,000. I mean, it's just, or should it just be a flat fee? We looked at, you know, if you're building a brand new building, rather than saying, okay, you have a fee for a building permit and a fee for a plumbing permit and a fee for a HVAC system and you know, all these different fees, that it becomes an all-inclusive fee, including the certificate of occupancy at the end. So that from a customer's perspective, we have a way of measuring the square footage of the property times an average building cost, and that's what you pay, and it's all-inclusive of all of those things. Now, the electrician's still gonna have to come in and get a permit, but there's no fee for it because it's included in the upfront fee that the homeowner pays or the property owner pays. So it's really about how can we think about this differently, because if you look at the way that we're doing it now, well, it's certain rate for up to this much money and then it's something else for something else. I mean, it's really, really hard to calculate that. And then are we really being fair to everybody that comes in that's trying to do the same thing? It is done like this. Joe's done some homework on this to find out who else does this type of permit fee structure. And I can tell you that my experience is that it's much easier for staff. It's much more transparent for the community, and everybody just knows exactly what it is. The area that we could talk about is how much is the average cost for building in Ossining, and whether or not, I mean, we picked a rate, and Joe has some basis for that rate, but is that the rate that's really applicable if the philosophy of changing the methodology is acceptable to the board? So, Joe, if you want to share some ideas on where the rate came from and what your thoughts are.
So I went on some websites to see what they consider is the average cost of construction, whether it being additions, new construction, a new home, new building. And obviously throughout the nation it varies. It can be anywhere between, say, $100 per square foot to $200 square foot. But where they showed the lower costs were mostly in regions, say, in the South, where then, you know, you would see buildings are built with slab on grade. There's no foundations. There's no issues where they have freezing requirements where you have to meet depth. And when you get to this area in this region, most of them came out with around $150 per square foot cost. and I guess they go up to maybe up to 200 depending on certain regions where maybe the areas or locations or where they're doing higher end construction. So I had chose about $150. It was comparable to what the city of Peekskill does, which is close by, and they charge $150 square foot. There was a couple of websites like Home Advisor and Fixit.net and so forth that gave some average cost of about $150 per square foot. But like Debbie had said, if the board feels that that particular amount of money per square foot was a little higher for Ossining, I mean, we could always adjust it to what we feel is a fair rate. But I believe the system of actually having some sort of formula to give to the residents for a permit fee is important, because most of the residents don't really know. When we ask them that when they're filling out a form of the application, here you have to put your estimated construction costs, and the majority of them say, I don't know, maybe $20,000, when really in the end the cost could be $50,000, or sometimes they may say $50,000 and really the cost should be $20,000. So they're really just guessing, and understandably, because they don't do this every day. So to make it a lot easier, it would be, and to be honest with you, when you compare two different residents, we'll have a different opinion. And if somebody says it's, I'm doing an addition, and the person down the block is doing an addition with a similar size, and somebody says it's $100,000 and somebody says it's $25,000, the amount of permit fee being charged to a resident is not equitable. It's not fair. So I think it's a lot easier for the residents to make it understood if we show them the formula and figure out the cost for them and tell them this is your permit fee. This way it's even across the board for every resident that's applying for the same type of project, and it's all inclusive, so they're not a lot of them have told me when I put down an estimated cost, I thought I was including my electrical and my plumbing, and now my electrician, my plumber comes in, he's being charged a permit fee for that. In this case, it would just be if a plumbing, an HVAC system, an electrical is part of the entire scope of work, those particular contractors would just come in and file their license that they're doing the work. So we're ensuring that they are licensed and insured, but they wouldn't be charged a fee. It would be paid upfront instead of in bits and pieces. And I believe that would actually make it a lot easier for residents to understand how they file for their permits and their fees.
More questions and comments?
So if just adding to that, we talked through if I just want to come in and replace my boiler, so you'll see a bunch of fees that are just a flat fee because it's just a replacement of something. And again, we calculated our labor rate with salary and benefits for the average of $72 an hour. So one of the discussion points that we had when we looked at should we charge $100 or $150 or $200 for a flat fee was really Joe's experience on how long does it take to get the application in, review it, go to the site, do the inspection, do the paperwork. So some of them you'll see have different rates because the nature of the one-time change out or addition could take longer. On the second page of the proposals, under additional fees, there is a line item that says if you submit your plans and we go through the review and we issue your permit, and then you have to revise your plan, there are some folks that will revise that plan over and over and over again. We have not been collecting additional fees for the additional review, but we are doing them 2 or 3 times. So there's a proposal here for if you're going to change it up, then you have to pay a little extra for the review because it's more time. There's also a skipped inspection fee. So if you don't call for your inspections and you start down and finish a project or whatever, then you have to pay a fee because we have to figure out, Joe has to figure out how to certify that what he now can't see is actually installed properly. And then under vacant property, that's the law that you passed this current year, so that's all structure there that has to be added.
Where are you looking?
We're in
On page,
42.
which is demolition on the top. Yeah, you're right there. This
Yeah.
is all the fees they're talking about here. This is the
Those are just copied directly the way it was written in local law 5.
Thank you.
that are associated with it.
right. And then a change of occupancy certificate, that was part of the legislation as well, but we're recommending that we change it from change of occupancy to also change of use certificate, so that the fee would be the same regardless of whether it's occupancy or use.
So saying both? Change of occupancy / use certificate?
Right, right.
Can you just clarify for me, so when I look at property type residential, commercial, year 1, 2, 3, and subsequent, is this what we're talking about for the,
That's a vacant property.
Vacant
Oh,
buildings,
okay.
that was
Buildings.
directly from local law 5.
right, okay. Thank you, now that makes sense. Where was the discussion of the permits being resubmitted? Because,
Right above that. So under the big words, additional fees,
okay, 250, so plan revision after permit is issued. Oh, after the permit
after
is
it's issued, right.
So the fee that you're paying for the application is obviously if I have to do multiple reviews for an architect and send them a revision list on the first one and say you're missing these items and have to revise the plan and bring it in to correct that, that's part of the original permit fee.
Okay.
Once the permit's issued, and we have this happen often, you know, what the homeowner, the contractor, whoever it is, has made changes along the construction of the original permit, and then they'll drop off and say, we have a whole set of revised plans because now the homeowners changed their mind and did it a certain way. And this can happen 2 or 3 times along the entire time of the project. Right now, we have to accept it in and we review it and have to basically do it again, but it's work being done that is of no cost to anyone, the applicant, because they've made these changes.
Thank you. I didn't understand the distinction of, because you're going to kick it back to, a lot of them are going to get kicked back, and you're going to say, clarify this, draw this differently, whatever.
Right.
But that's
Right.
not the additional fee. The additional fee is once they've been approved, and then they make changes.
And then they make
post-approval.
changes, right.
Okay. That makes sense, because then you're doing your process again.
Right.
I like the package deal approach. Would that have a statute? Like, so let's say I start the process, but I don't actually get to my CO. I stop the project, or it just takes me a lot longer. Does that package still, like, is there a time frame associated with that?
Right now in our law, it says that permits are good for 1 year. And if you've already started the project, you can request a 6-month extension at no cost.
And
So
the
you-
extension's an application, they're just letting you know that,
No,
hey,
they
I need more time.
right now they'll just give me a letter or something requesting that they need an additional 6 months, and then we just modify the expiration date on the permit to another 6 months and just give them an updated permit with a new expiration date. Then after 18 months, then they're required to take a new permit again, because that's the way it's written in our law right now. If we wanted to change that, we'd have to modify that in the law as well.
Okay. And just to clarify, earlier you said that depending on the applicant and the project, let's say you broke down, let's say I'm building something and you broke down the initial cost to the very end CO. Are we making it, would we make it in a way more attractive because it's cheaper if you get a package deal than get it, on your own timing and your own phase, doing it separately, or like how are we selling it? I mean, why would someone want a package deal versus doing it individualized on their own?
I think it's because you're coming in to do a full project, and you're going to pay the fees for everything up front, so that you don't come in and every single time another contractor comes in, he has to pay another fee, another fee, another fee. So it's kind of that all-inclusive, if you will, as opposed to all these different levels of fees. So what I've heard since I've been here is, now I have another fee, and I have to pay a fee for a certificate of occupancy, and why do I have to pay for this fee and that fee? And it just seemed like it was very confusing to some of the folks that were asking for permits. I think it's a better deal for them, and we're talking about somebody that's doing a brand new structure. Okay, so if you're just doing a bathroom remodel or you're just doing improvements, electrical upgrades, again, that's a different structure.
And it's also non-refundable, right? So let's say they can't fund the project, then they'll never get to a CO.
Yeah, you don't
Okay.
get your money.
All right.
So in your example, you had mentioned the decks, but when we're talking about like some of our bigger buildings, how's this fee schedule or this proposal applicable? Is it still like 150 per square foot or 100?
No, if it's, whether it's a residential, commercial, we were putting a $150 per square foot for any additions, new construction. When we were discussing about decks, is obviously a deck you can do by square footage, but a construction of a deck is not going to cost you $150 a square foot. So we discussed about what really entails the building departments, what is the work necessary for the issuance of a permit for a deck until you issue a certificate at the end, and figuring what would be the actual hours of doing that. So it would be a review of a plan, issuing a permit, maybe 2 inspections, a footing and a final framing inspection. So we thought, does it make a difference whether the deck is 10 by 10 or 20 by 40? The same process of work is being done on our part. We're still doing the same number of inspections and the same plan review. It's just that somebody's building a bigger deck. The way it works right now is if you are coming in to apply for a permit, just because you're building a bigger deck, even though we're doing the same amount of time, effort into the work, you'd be paying more money for the permit because the deck's going to cost you more money to construct. Whereas what we're saying is it would just be one flat fee. If the deck, whatever size it's going to be, we're just charging you the cost of our time to inspect it and issue the permits and the C of O for that.
All right, so when we're talking about residential and commercial, and again, the only reason I ask this question is because oftentimes when we meet with our tax assessor, what we may consider residential is actually commercial. So when you're talking about commercial, are you referencing apartment buildings, or?
It could be anything that's a building that occupies a commercial use, or a mixed use building, or a 3-family and up is a commercial.
Okay, so I would. So I know in certain instances, if you're building a 1-family, 2-family house, there's a cost per square foot. But then when you start getting into some of the larger projects, they can be more. And so you were able to rest on 150.
Well, we did an average. I mean, it can, again, as we discussed, if we're talking about 150, it can be discussed where we would say maybe we're doing a square footage cost for residential at 150, and maybe commercial you want to say it's 200. But the idea of what we're trying to present today is just the formula, the scope of how we're going to be doing the permit fees. Discussing what you want to charge per square footage is part of the discussion.
All right, so for me, you guys have clearly thought about this. So for the structure and the new approach, I'm definitely fine with. The only thing that I would caution is really to get some solid numbers when it comes, with residential versus once you get to the point of, 40 or 50 or 60 units, because there are some numbers out there, particularly with Westchester. I mean, some of these buildings are clearly nowhere near $150 per square foot. I mean, some of these contractors are paying, $235, $275. So for me, I would feel more comfortable if we're actually using as real as possible numbers as possible when it comes to the different kind of projects that we're seeing in our community. But the overall concept and definitely trying to streamline the process and thinking about incorporating manpower and time and benefits, I'm definitely supportive of that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So could I just ask a clarification question? So let's say it's just a single-family home that's going up at 150, but we're building now a multi-story apartment complex. That would actually be more? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
So what I'm saying is yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, because I'm saying if we're using numbers as far as the average cost, the cost to build a single family home is far cheaper than to build a multi-family.
Okay.
So if the logic was, hey, we looked and we did some research and we said, okay, well, this is the average cost in the area, then I think we should actually have a little more solidified as far as the average cost in the area. If that was the concept.
For different kinds of
Exactly.
construction.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And that's fair, that's reasonable, and I'll do some research on that, and we'll see the compare numbers of what the estimates are from various different websites and information that's available. And it may be just as that. I have seen some that would say a residential cost of, like you said, is a certain per square footage, and a commercial is always maybe $50 a square foot more. So,
And I'm just saying from a there's a difference between building a 3-family house, right? Then there's stick construction, right? And that's 5-story. But then the moment that you get into steel construction,
it's different.
you're talking about something. You're in a whole different ballpark. So if you said to me, "Hey, Trustee Bazemore, we're going to charge $150 for steel construction," I'm looking at you like, "Well,
Right.
well, why?"
Understood.
Yeah. So that's
Gotcha.
my point.
Okay, yep, we can do that.
Anybody else have comments about the building department proposed fees? Oh, yes, okay, Manny. Trustee-elect Quesada, ask your questions, please.
Thank you. So I'm gonna agree with some of the stuff like Quintel mentioned. I with the square footage with residential and commercial is a big difference, and when you go into finishes, is even greater total different number. You can spend $300 for a square foot in a kitchen. So, so going with that, Bain, and some of the stuff that was, I don't see it at least in my charge like here, but nothing against you, Joe. Please don't take this personal. You talked about revisions and charging about revisions after the first initial marked-up of the drawings were submitted to the building department. So let's say we get a revision.
No, actually, that
After
was the
permit
distinction.
is
It was-
issued.
No. So there needs to be a difference then between I submit a set of drawings to the building department. The building department reviews the drawings. Then the building department, and I've been in some few municipalities where I have submitted drawings and there's no revisions at all, and I get a building permit within a week. Typically what happens is you get a set of drawings, and whatever happens, you get at least minimum of 5 comments from any municipality. Does that count?
No additional
Okay,
charge.
so now, what has happened in the past, and it has been here in Austin too, right, and I'm just not talking about goes from years from now, and goes for all the municipalities, and I know where you're going with making changes and modification. Usually, in a technical world, in an architectural, even an engineering world, what that means is you do an as-built set of drawings. What an as-built set of drawings is what we ask, and is in our code as well, what we ask for any changes or modification that happen from the original set of drawings. So as revisions go through, there are times that either the building department as a body that does inspections, and I've seen this in other municipalities, they usually, depending on what it is, either inspections from footings with the homeowner didn't call you and make an appointment for you to check, to verify. What has happened in other municipalities and what has happened here is usually the architect submits a letter saying that, he verified the footing and he ensures the footing is correct. It's 42 inches. So is that something that is going to be changing? So what happens? To me, it's a little bit more a process and applications, I guess, because there's a couple things in here. Obviously, we went over this, but fire escape stairs. There's nothing in the code that requires that anymore. So if we're charging for something that the building code doesn't allow anymore, that's something that we need to look into.
So we had that conversation about
Yeah.
the
So
terminology.
again, so there's another one about windows, replacing windows. So do we do that, or actually replacing roofs? New York State code changed that law a long time ago.
Roofing, though, right?
Yes, no. So if you're replacing your roofing, your shingles, by New York State, by code, you not require a building permit. But if you have to replace any roof rafters, any structurals, you require a building permit.
Yeah, I thought we had actually
Correct.
made this
So
friendlier.
part of this, one of the applications is here that you need a building permit to replace your roof. thing.
Yeah. So
So to me, it's like if we're gonna do this, then we need to go back and make sure what we're doing and how we're charging things. Nothing against the process, which I think is we need to clean that up a little bit. But we need to think about what is the process and how did the process goes through, because I still haven't seen, and hopefully, most likely I'm going to foil for that information. But a big project down in the waterfront, there was a couple minor changes in the layout. So if that happens now, if the board decides to change the code or change how the applications fee, does that mean that that person or the developer has to pay out all those changes that happened in that property? So again, so I think the board needs to look at all these proposals and actually see what that means going forward. It's not just, I agree with the square footage. I agree with some of the stuff in here. But there's a lot of stuff in here that I think it needs to look into more and actually have a little bit more of understanding what happens in Westchester County itself and other municipalities. So, thank you.
So I would like to just speak to the roof issue. If you have shingles that blow off your roof, you don't need a permit to fix them. And the purpose for getting a permit of only $150 is to verify that you are only putting the second roof layer on. Is that correct? Because you're not allowed to have multiple roofs on your building. It's a structural issue.
what's the maximum number of roof?
You can put up to 2 layers. But once you get past 2 layers, you have to take all the layers off and start off with a new
So if
layer
you're,
of shingles.
if you're gonna put a whole new roof on over the roof that you have, you come in and get it's $150. Again, we gotta review to make sure that we're gonna verify that it is your second layer. So it's smaller, but the 500 for tearing off everything and putting a new roof on. It's not for the,
But this is that we're being more stringent than New York State requires, and more stringent than we required a year ago.
Correct. If I may. So what happens if, like, within the next 2 years, I'm going to be replacing my roof? But I hate putting another layer onto my current roof right now. So I'm going to be removing that. So that means that I had to pay an application fee based on what you just said now, that a year ago, if I would have done that, I didn't have to do it. And it's not in state code either.
okay.
So to me, again, so if we're going to be changing this, then that's part of the policy of the board, that it has to go back and put that in writing. Because that's something other municipalities either do it and it says the writing on the zoning regulations.
Okay, good.
Or we just don't do it at all.
Right.
Again, by building code, it's not required. The structural members that need to be replaced is required. You need to hire an architect, you need to replace all that stuff, or you need to replace in kind, depending on how the situation is. Again, right now, we don't require that by New York State code. So that's something that we have to do as a board, change that policy. Either replace the windows, we need a building permit for that. That needs to be in the code. Again, I'm just
No, I
throwing
think
things out.
okay,
So
I got
that's
it.
something that we went over that a year and a half ago.
No, yeah, but I think we're trying to streamline things. We have a lot that we ask of our building department. We want them to focus on the things that are the most important, that are life safety issues. And to my recollection, that's when we took out, if you were not making structural changes, you were just doing a window replacement, you don't need a permit. If you're not making a structural change for the roofing, you don't need a permit. But it seems like now we're becoming more stringent, and I'm just not sure from, the reason we rolled it back was, I guess we decided, that's not the most important health safety issue that we want our building department to be focusing on, but we're adding it back in, and I'm as a policy decision, I'm not sure why.
Well, I can say this. There is a list of items that New York State, and I didn't bring it with me, but I can double check that. There are a list of items which New York State says doesn't require permits. Some of them are things like if you build a shed structure or storage structure under 144 square feet, putting up swing sets in a backyard, those things don't require permits. But things like, for example, replacement windows, that would not be on the list because technically replacement windows that you would be responsible to make sure they're energy compliant, and there is energy code requirements for that. So not that we are obligated to ask for a permit for something like that, and I don't believe that was one of the items that
No,
we
I don't
have
see
on the
windows
list.
on here. No, I think
But-
we
but
actually
it-
took it out.
But it's an example
Time to
of, an item such as replacement windows. If a municipality is requesting permits for replacement windows, they can basically state that they have the right to ask for those permits because they need to meet certain New York State energy requirement. So then they wouldn't be out of line to ask for a permit on that. We are not proposing that.
Good, okay.
But, as for re-roofing, I'm not going to say whether or not it states in the list that that's not a requirement of a permit, because a lot of municipalities do require permits. We don't have to ask for one. We haven't over the last couple of years. But I do believe if the Village of Austining wanted to charge for a roofing permit, I don't think it would be against regulations because there are weight loads and stuff on a roof.
I'm sure it's not against regulations. I think we were trying,
It's not an exemption under our code.
I know it's under state code.
Yeah, but I'm
Oh.
saying, we specifically, we took portions
You
of the
need to,
state
you
code.
need to turn your microphone on.
I'm terribly sorry.
You haven't spoke, you're, oh, I know. you've been
Uh,
so-
But when this board adopted the changes initial changes to Chapter 162 last year, and we adopted a lot of the state code, there was a section in the state code which we put in, which were exemptions, where we talk about no building permit shall be required. We didn't adopt every single one of those sections that's there. But, for example, construction, as Joe said, with one-story detached structures is one. Installation of swing sets, swimming pools with a one or two family home with a depth of less than 24 inches, fences, temporary motion picture sets or stages, installation of window awnings, installation of partitions, painting wallpaper, tiling, or any similar. Those, under our code, are explicit exceptions where building permits are not required. So that's, yeah, I just want to make it clear.
But it's also, we haven't had permits for roofing because it's also not required that you have a permit for roofing.
Correct. I just want to make it clear that that's, we, in our code, we specifically list these as exemptions.
So I think to us, it becomes a question of, we get a lot of pushback from the community members on why are we trying to nickel and dime everybody? Why are you trying to get in the way of me being able to just upgrade my house and clean it up and put a new, and sometimes the answer is because if you do it wrong, it's dangerous. And that to me is when we want to make sure there's a permit so that we're keeping an eye on it. If that's not the greatest concern, then I prefer to just let people fix their homes. So I'm not the expert. At one point, we thought roofing, if it's not a structural change, we don't need permits. So
I mean, it can be looked at, we don't charge, for example, a fee for somebody who puts up new vinyl siding or replacement windows. But, I mean, it could be said that, if somebody's going to work on a roof of a house, there is, you would want to make sure that the person who's doing that is proper licensing and insurances because, if you look at insurance companies, contractors pay very high rates for roofing because of the.
But this doesn't
need of
require,
injury.
my husband could just put on some sticky shoes and go up there and fix the roof. We're not protecting him from, he's not gonna do that, but, I'm just saying, but this doesn't come with stipulations of safety requirements of
Right.
licensed contractors doing the work, right?
No, I understand. I'm just saying because part of the safety, like for example, we ask for a permit when you do a tree removal, and it would seem pretty misunderstood. Why are we taking a permit for tree removal? And if we're talking about it as a safety factor, we have homeowners, and I think, and not a couple of years ago, that an owner himself on a Sunday tried to take a tree down and actually seriously injured himself or was killed from the tree falling on himself. Whereas by issuing a permit, the people who are coming in for the permit are licensed, insured tree removal people.
No, not necessarily. I got a permit from the village to have a tree cut down. I mean, I didn't cut it down. I did hire somebody to do it. But I mean, like, I don't want to go through every single thing, but the tree, the tree, and I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but since, you know, the tree in particular, that's an environmental stormwater management question too, not just, you know, if.
Well, I mean, maybe
dumb
I'm
enough to
choosing the
just-
wrong thing. I mean, we do take that also because it's required that we have an arborist approve one, and he gets paid
Yeah.
a fee. But, you know, a lot of the times that we try to put in permits are for structural issues or safety.
Yeah, yeah,
requirements,
and that's
so-
important, and that's part of our job, is to keep people and residents safe.
I'm gonna kind of pivot a little bit. The skipped inspection fee. What, when you thought about the fee, like what were you thinking about? Were you thinking about residential? Were you thinking about?
No, it's because what happens is there's a lot of contractors, and I understand Manny's concern, but the problem is if you take a permit and we give you a list of inspections that are required to be done, and we've told you that up front that you need to allow the building department to do a process of these inspections, and a contractor decides, I don't want to wait until Friday for my inspection, I'm just going to go ahead and pour that footing and do it, and has blatantly chosen not to allow us to do the inspection, as a building inspector, I have the right to say, I do not want to take a certification from your architect, because if that would be the case, then the architect might as well certify everything, skip the entire process. Why bother ask for inspections? And to be honest with you, I don't think it's really right that an architect and engineer should be responsible now to take on a liability of a structural element of a construction just because a contractor who just decided he didn't want to wait 2 days to get an inspection. By implementing this type of fine in there will regulate them to actually do the process properly. I would assume that they would be given these fees in the beginning, but would realize that we're trying to make sure we get this process done right, and those would probably not be continuing to happen. It's the same thing what we did last year when people who do not come in and apply for their permits get $1,000 fee because they chose to do the work without taking a permit. This is pretty much in the same line.
All right. So the reason I asked that question is because when I think about these things, I think about some larger projects where we've had some issues in the past, right? And so, I'm not really thinking about, like, you know, single family home or, you know, 2-family home. I'm kind of thinking is some of the bigger projects. What is 250 though? Like, what is 250 to
It's not a 250, it's 25% of the.
Oh, 25%. Okay.
You talk about for the cost of the revised plans?
No,
or-
he's talking about the skip fee.
Oh,
Skip
it's,
fee.
was just basically putting out an idea of a fee that they would be charged for skipping an inspection. And to be honest with you, the reality is, if a contractor decides to pour a foundation and not allow us to do the inspection, he should actually pay that fee and be asked to remove it and now do it again and let us start and do the proper inspection, because I don't have to accept the certification.
And you believe?
And to be honest with you, I wouldn't understand why any design professional would want to take on that liability to begin with.
So maybe 250 is not enough.
That's
So
that's
where do you
that's
see
what-
the, where do you see the 250? Because I'm seeing
Right, it says
$50.
skip- No, it says right here, additional fees.
Yeah.
You're in the wrong page.
that's
I'm
what I'm saying.
looking at
That's what
plumbing,
I'm
Mr.
looking
I'm
at.
specifically
It was
plumbing.
it was a fee just put out what would be a reasonable
$1,000.
Well, I have to say, you know, honestly, you know, I mean, how else can we verify and know that the work's been done the way it's supposed to be done if you don't allow us to inspect it? And if they seal up a wall or they do that stuff like that, well, guess what? They're gonna have to rip it out, right? I mean,
No, I meant
Well, I actually had just recently an issue where a contractor poured an entire footing, and he said, "Oh, I'll have my architect certify it." And this architect said, "You know, before I certify it, I'd like you to cut a section of this so I can see it." And he did, and the plans called for them to put steel rebar in it. There weren't any. So he said, "Thank God I made them do that, because I would have taken on that liability." And again, I said to him, "This is why I don't want them doing this way, and then having you to have the responsibility to sign on something you didn't see either."
I don't think it's enough money.
That's where I was getting at.
Yeah, I don't think it's enough money. I'd put $1,000 in there. I mean, for them to like not allow you to do your job, to inspect it, so you could guarantee the safety of, or guarantee the integrity
Well,
of that piece of work. I mean, that's your whole job, is to make sure that it's done right.
And so that's why I was kind of asking you, when you're looking at the fee, is this a 250 for again, I don't know too much about contractors or what kind of project we're talking about, but if it's a small project, if it's a small house or something, maybe 250 is a hitter. But if we're talking about something where you're talking about footings and cement and foundation,
That's per incident.
yeah, but
So every footing is 250?
So it's per incident. So like if we have multiple inspections that they skipped, it's 250 for each one that they skipped.
Well, what it doesn't say in here is the piece that you're talking about. You have the option to either accept or not accept a letter of certification from the architect, right?
Right, and I feel that a certification is acceptable when a homeowner inherited, they bought a property, a previous owner may have finished a basement or so for 20 years ago. It's of no fault of them. I don't want to punish that homeowner by saying, well, now you're going to rip down all walls because we have to do inspections. At this point, we would accept that, okay, if an architect feels comfortable that they want to certify certain aspects of it, that it has insulation, has framings, that's fine. But if you've taken out a permit for a project that you're proposing to build, and I give you a list of inspections that need to be followed and done, and you choose not to, I do not have to take a certification from an architect. You've
And
been
you
given notice.
And you probably wouldn't want to take a certification from an architect without doing taking any measures of something like a substantial footing that is, part of the foundation that's going to hold this building from collapsing. You're much less likely to just say, oh, well, just give me a letter, we're good.
Right, and in that case, we
And-
might as well
and-
skip the entire process and let them do this on every inspection.
Right. So some things are easier to go back and, says, okay, give me the 250. Now let me look at this and now you're good. And some things, no, you really have to dig some up. Right?
Yeah,
And
I
that's
mean,
that is in your discretion.
That's a discretion, correct. I mean, if somebody says, I skipped an installation inspection, okay, I'm gonna charge you the fee, and you can take down the sheetrock and I'll see it, and put new ones back up. If you put in something like a foundation, there's no way for me to know if an architect says, one, I wouldn't know the condition of the ground that was put on. It could have been put in a pool of water for all I know, and it's no good, and the ground is all mud. Or they're asking for 5 pieces of rebar in it. How would I ever be able to have him uncover that other than breaking up the cement and start over? So it depends on what they actually skipped.
I'm comfortable with having a fee that everybody pays and then you deciding if you're going to make them, how much they have to uncover.
To
or
do the
what
proper
would be
inspection,
acceptable
right.
in some circumstances.
Right.
Yes, trustee-elect?
Actually, I'm going to agree with what Joe said. And I actually grateful to hear that coming from a building inspector's point of view, because a lot of the municipalities around Westchester, they just would like to see a letter from an architect or an engineer and saying those footings are acceptable. So hearing that from the building inspectors and here in the village of Austining is a big improvement from a lot of stuff that I see in other municipalities around our area. So yes, basements, walls, things like that. Architects or engineers do pros to verify some of the existing conditions that has happened in the past. But yes, foundation, there are big issues. Structural work is a big issue for just to give a letter out like that. So I agree with that. So thank you.
Good. Okay.
But it's not enough.
That's what we.
Okay, no,
No, I'm just saying, this is a situation where a contractor is willfully,
You
not
told him what to
following the
do.
process. You told him what to do, and then he went ahead and did it with
Yeah.
it. We can't, there's too many
who's
people.
paying the fee, the homeowner or the contractor? And I'm not talking about giant buildings.
Good question. I mean, I would say the contractor, right?
Goes to the property owner, right?
How are you gonna go after that's a legal action, you can't make contractors pay.
No, I'm asking out loud.
But if I hired a contractor
You can sue them.
and you skipped the spot and I got charged $1,000, I was just doing it out of number, then one, I'll probably sue you, and if not, that's a horrible rating because Because when you hire a contractor, you don't expect them to skip stuff. I mean, that's one of the reasons you hire a contractor.
Well, this is the same situation when a permit is not taken out. We charge to come in and file the permit, you're going to pay $1,000 for not taking out that permit. I don't know if it's paid by the contractor or by the homeowner. Somebody pays it, and I'm sure the homeowner and the contractor have to work out how that fee is being covered.
Where did you come up with the $250?
It was just the fee that I
Does it
did.
exist in
doesn't.
other communities?
No, I did not find that from other communities.
Okay, we're introducing something for the first time, and we don't have any comparables to go on. I say let's go with what was recommended at 250.
I say 1,000.
I'm not down with that. I am, this is, you know, we cannot be in this situation where people, they don't ask for permission, they just ask for forgiveness.
Right, but what he's saying is, as valuable as Joe is, he doesn't make $250 an hour. Our fees should be covering the expense of what we have to deal with. But what these homeowners may then have to do, if it's a matter of safety or structural integrity, is they're gonna have to undo it and redo it. They're gonna eat a lot of expense if he says you have to rip out your concrete floor and show me something.
Yeah, and then then they should go and sue the contractor. We have no relationship to the
Right.
contractor. And then when it costs them $10,000 to do it, then they should go after the but our relationship is with people who own the homes, not with people they hire. That's their responsibility. So now it's down to dollars, whether it's $250 or $5 or $8 or $1,000 or whatever.
Right. Well, the discussion tonight was concept,
Okay.
and
So we're glad.
so
we're
fees
glad you're
and
good with
fees and costs are all this.
Tell us what you
So-
are.
Concept.
I'll compromise to 5, just because
For the difference, huh?
yeah.
Who are you splitting the difference with? 250 to 1,000, it's the
Well-
splitting of the difference is not 500. And like,
All right, so
I mean, and why are you even splitting it? Why don't you come up with a better recommendation, since people don't seem to be happy with 250? You should do some research as to what might be the right
nobody else
price.
is doing this, that's what he said. No other municipalities are doing this. They're not punishing anybody for allowing, and that's what,
Really odd.
So how do you justify $1,000?
Well, I think he wants to do
I-
5,000, I'm not sure.
Because they're being punitive, that's why, because they're willfully, not following a process that's
So-
important for us to do.
It's difficult for me to justify saying we're gonna charge you $5,000 because you skipped
who
an
said 5?
inspection. That's what I just heard.
No, I was.
No, she was
That's
just.
her-
We could be
that was
with
me.
that, but
I'm saying that, he really, what,
Okay,
he
so
doesn't want to do that?
$1,000,
That's exactly what he wants to do.
$1,000 is a significant amount of money that to say, we're gonna charge you $1,000 and rip up your entire concrete
We
foundation.
wouldn't be charging you $1,000, Victoria, if you filed the list.
Right, but back to the point that Rika and I were making is, we are charging the property owner $1,000. They are then going to have to pay their contractor to do the work again, and they're gonna figure it out with their contractor. But what is it, the burden, the financial burden on us as a municipality, like, these fees are supposed to be reflective of the cost that we have to cover.
Joe, could you?
Well, in this particular case, it's really a deterrent, because they did the work and we weren't able to inspect it, and they're going to do it again to allow for the inspection, which is part of the application cost. The idea of putting in a monetary figure to it is a deterrent for a contractor to do this process. So if you feel that,
And
I mean,
nobody-
if a person, if a contractor is getting charged $250 or $1,000, I think what really is hurtful for them is the fact that you're going to pay that fee, but you're still going to do it over again.
Right.
So they've lost the money of the material they spent to do this and the time spent on it to now have to redo it again
That just
anyway.
argues why the amount doesn't matter.
Right,
So if
So
you,
you just argued why the amount actually doesn't matter.
right. The biggest burden to them is the fact that they're going to have to do this over again, and they've
Yes,
lost all the cost to that. That's the
not
cost.
whether it's 250 or 1,000 or 500. And it's also, I mean, there are other issues here, like, did you actually tell them exactly what they are supposed to do, and in the right order of what they were supposed to do, and in a timely fashion that they were supposed to do it in?
They're given a list on every single permit of inspections that are required.
but you do have $1,000 fee if they start work without a permit.
That's a relatively new fee. How's that been working out?
In the beginning, people were getting charged that amount of money, but now it's less enforced because now people are coming in for permits. because they know that this is word has gotten out, you're going to get charged this amount of money.
I think,
Good.
I think putting a big number up there is gonna deter people from trying to do something without it getting the inspection. I think, I agree with Joe, the $1,000 without getting the permit, that's a deterrent. Everybody's going, whoa, gee, if I go ahead and start and I don't have a permit, I mean, that's gonna cost me. You know, it's really about changing behavior. And if people think they can just do things and they bake it into the cost of doing business, then that's no good, you know? That's what I'm saying here. We're making a statement about our expectation that people are gonna follow the rules.
I think $1,000 is a high fee.
Well, listen, I'm only
The
one
majority of the
person.
table, no, you're not just, well, you are just one person, but there is a number of people who agree with it. I think you want to be punitive. I don't think that being punitive
No, I
to
wanna
some
be
homeowner
deter- no, I
that
wanna
hires a general
deter.
contractor and the general contractor behaves in this way, I think you're just,
I think if we put a little notice in there at the beginning when they get their permit that says, these are some things you really need to think about. That if you do this, this is what happens, okay? And that's important.
I think we're agreeing on the fact of the concept
Yes. Oh, no,
is
no, we're
proper.
definitely-
So
Yeah,
Oh,
we're
no, we agree.
if it's,
we are good
the
with that on
reality is
everything.
we're so close to being able to say we can adopt the building recommended fees, although I still don't think we should have a fee for roofing unless it's structural. But it would be nice if we could
Yeah,
decide on
absolutely.
this number, because we're really close.
Yes.
So we still have some research to do for you, and that is to look at the cost of the different types of construction.
Oh, right, okay, so we'll just talk about it on the 12th of December, we'll
So-
see where everybody feels.
So we can
we
do
can do some more
that.
research
that.
on all of this.
And,
Higher number now.
right. But we'll see what we can find out. I mean, we'll try to do some other thinking on the 250,
Unless it's a deterrent.
right.
All right, thank you very
good.
much, Mr.
All right.
Agostinelli.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe,
All right, and is anybody else exhausted?
you're sleeping in the morning?
I'm good.
I've had a late night week.
Yeah.
All right, so,
Where are we?
Now we're
All
doing
right,
capital.
so now we need just to finish up the capital and look at the overall numbers. Yeah, no, I would hand it out now so they have something to write on and look at. And you want me to help you?
general fund?
We do. So Tom, do you want to go over the list?
Sure. Mayor and trustees, as we had suggested last time we met to talk about the budget, I carried forward based on discussions that we had about certain items. We didn't talk about everything that was in the capital plan, but we talked about quite a bit of it. So I carried forward those that I thought the board had or would approve for the 2019 column, and then I made notations, especially for the smaller items, vehicles, and some of the smaller dollar amounts that I'm suggesting be paid for by use of 2018 surplus in the general fund or water fund instead of issuing debt. And I guess if we just go through this page by page quickly, I can highlight some of these changes here. On page 1, we had already talked about the complete streets design being paid for with surplus monies because that only has a 5-year life, I believe, if that were to be issued. Going down the page, the backhaul truck, due to the cost and
At the bottom
its-
of one, though.
yeah, we're still on page 1.
Okay.
Due to the cost of the VACOL truck and the fact that it has at least a 15-year life, the recommendation is to issue the bonds, but then the vehicle lift and a skid loader would be from surplus on page 2. With the garbage trucks, again, because of their long useful life and the cost involved, those would be serial bonds. The utility vehicle for the foreman, that probably has a 5-year life, so I was suggesting that that be paid for from surplus. The police department vehicles and the other equipment that they were asking for, due to the small useful life of the vehicles and the small dollar amounts of the other items, the recommendation was to use surplus fund balance. In the fire department, the chief's vehicle, I believe, has a 3-year life, so that would be surplus fund balance. Surplus fund balance. The fire apparatus would be a serial bond because that's a 20-year life. On page 3, the parking meters, and also the electric vehicles for the building department. I had those as debt just because of the high dollar amount involved. The recreation truck could probably go either way. With it being a pickup truck, it probably has a 5-year or less useful life. And then down the page, there's a box there about the water department 4x4 utility truck. DPW had actually requested a replacement 4x4 utility truck for the water transmission and distribution staff, and that got overlooked when we were preparing the capital plan. Andy said that this would replace a 2001 Dodge Ram truck that they're still using, and is in pretty poor condition. They have at least 6 employees that are out on the roads at any given time.
So how are you proposing to pay for that?
That would be from waterfront surplus. Or we could just stick it into the operating budget. I think that there's enough margin to absorb that without issuing debt.
From the water fund?
In the water fund, yes. On page 4, the improvements to the Rodriguez Center, that would have to be bonded due to the high cost. And also the 200 Main Street stabilization expenditure would probably have to be bonded due to the high cost. And also the HVAC system in the police department. The next item we didn't really talk about much, the accounting system conversion that we're undergoing right now. And we could probably talk about this at a later time, since all these capital projects are going to need further board action to actually become a capital project in terms of a capital project resolution. And for those that require debt, we need a bond resolution as well. So we didn't want to get sidetracked talking about this tonight. We thought that it might require additional time. The comprehensive plan, we had already had decided that that could be paid for from accumulated surplus because that has a 5-year useful life. And the Sing Sing Prison Museum are grants that are passing through the village for the museum work. And on page 5, when Bill was here, he had prioritized the work at the parks that he thought he would address first. So I put those in the board approved columns, and I moved the other ones out to at least 2020 until such time as he can better prioritize those.
I think, aren't they still in here? Oh, never mind. I wasn't reading carefully. Got it. Never mind.
And the one at the top of the page, the community center functionality and redesign assessment, because that is generally a very short-term useful life. If it were to be bonded, that should be paid for from accumulated general fund surplus. And then going on page 6 are the water improvements. A lot of these are small items that are just in the waterfront operating budget. The big items are the 2 well, aside from the trees, that we can take from the water fund fund balance. The THM removal systems for the water tanks. We're not sure what the cost is on that, but that should be bonded due to the long useful life of that project. And I, down the page over on the right side, I made a note, something that we had talked about previously, was because the 12-inch transmission line from Stormingtown Road to Route 134 hasn't been started as yet, as far as the construction. We had set aside water fund balance in 2017 for about $1.2 million for this project in order to apply for a grant. And we had talked about the possibility of keeping that money in the water fund instead and issue a serial bond to pay for that project, because that's a 20-year useful life on that project at least. It could be even longer. And that's pretty much it. The rest of the pages are, you know, small stuff that's in the operating budget. We just show it here in the capital plan, just so that Moody's can see that we actually are using operating funds for capital purposes, which is a good thing. On the very last page, I did summarize the different funding categories. The total of everything is about $12.7 million. And the first three items are the sum of the bonds between general water and sewer fund. And moving down, there's $1,057,000, which would be use of general fund surplus fund balance from 2018 to pay for the vehicles and the other smaller items that we had discussed. And also water fund surplus fund balance, $242,500. So that's the recommended capital budget plan. As I said, you know, this is just a plan. It needs a follow-up board resolution to actually become a capital project.
So it looks like you're gonna, well, obviously you're expecting a surplus of over $1 million, which is gonna cover from the general fund, right?
Yes.
Do we have a projection on what we think, do we have an idea where we're gonna be at the end of 18, you know, ballpark in terms of overall budget? Do we have a sense of that?
In like the general fund?
Yeah.
It hasn't really changed from when we talked about it, you know, 2 weeks ago. I haven't re-examined it. Not a lot has really changed. I still feel kind of confident that with the vacant positions and some of the surplus revenues that we've had, we should be able to restore $1 million, you know, back into the fund balance at the end of 2018.
Over and above the fund, over and above the surplus amount that we're using, or?
Basically, I would say that I guess you could view it as a wash. I view this $1 million use of fund balance as like the carryover fund balance from 2017. We were at over $11 million fund balance at the end of 2017. So, you know, my idea was that, you know, that was a good use of fund balance if that fund balance is a little bit high as a percentage of the operating budget, which it is.
We have $11 million in our fund balance, and our operating budget is $35 million.
It's, I think, about 36 million.
6, 7.
Almost 37.
Okay.
We did a quick calculation today. Based on a $37 million budget, somewhere between 15 and 20% is the recommended fund balance area that you want to be in. That's 5.5 million to 7.5 million. So that's what you want to have in your reserve. Right now, we have if we add the million that we think we're going to have left over from this year, 12.6. What we're seeing is a trend of using about $2 million a year out of the fund balance. If we continue to do what we're doing today, we have about 2 more years of being able to use that fund balance until we hit the target of 15 to 20%.
How is that the case? Didn't you just say we're going to be back about where we
Because-
were before?
Because if we're at, so at the end of 17, we're at 11.6. If we add $1 million, we're at 12.6. We take out 2 million this year in 19. That's 10.6. If I'm not predicting that we're going to have $1 million left over, because a lot of the money that we have left over were from positions that were not filled.
Unfilled.
We are filling those positions now, so we're not going to have that rollover. And so we would be at 10.6, and then in 2020, if we used another 2 million, we'd be at 8.6, and 21 we'd be at 6, and then we're between the 15 and 20%. So assuming that our carryovers every year are not going to be as exorbitant as they have been, I think it's going to require us to have some further discussions in 2019 about the use of fund balance, the use of how we're funding our budgets, and then what we had at the last meeting, a discussion about what's being charged to the water fund and the general fund, and philosophically where we want to be. So the three of us actually talked today about first quarter next year or shortly thereafter, where we put together a long-range plan for the board to consider so that you can talk about money policies and how we want to use our funds and where we want to be. Because I think that as one rate goes up, another goes down, and vice versa. But I think we do have higher levels of fund balance right now, but we certainly don't want to dip below our target. And how long will that help us survive? I love Tom's philosophy that we use the fund balance on one-time purchases that help us. But I do want to caution the board that we are seeing a trend where we may not have too many more years ahead of us. where we can do this.
Help me understand the numbers again, because you said there's 11 million in our fund balance, and I'm looking right now at the general fund summary.
Okay.
And that has the general fund appropriations up top, and then the breakdown of where all this revenue comes from. I'm not seeing, is there some place where we list the fund balance that I'm not recognizing?
No, it's not listed in this budget document.
Okay, but then if our tentative budget is, we'll say 37 million, and our fund balance is 11 million, if we spend the million as we're discussing tonight, then that's almost a third, isn't it? It's like 29.7%, isn't it? Am I doing the math wrong? I'm dividing 11 by 37. Because we've got $11 million in our
So
fund balance,
37.
the budget.
Oh, the
Didn't you say
37
that our, and this is, not my area of
30
expertise.
37 million times 15% is 5.5 million. So that would be the lowest that you would want to go in your fund balance account. 20% is better, and that's kind of the higher range. So 20% of 37 million is 7.4, rounded to 7.5 just for easy accounting. So somewhere between 7.5 and 5.5 is that optimal range of where you want your fund balance reserve to be. So when you say to yourself, I have $11 million, it seems like a lot. But if your policy is going to be that we don't want to drop below 5, then what you have to use over the next several years is much smaller than an 11 million or a $12 million number. Because it sounds like we have a lot.
Well, because we have 30%, and we don't want to dip below 5.5%. So
15.
we don't. I'm sorry, 5.5 million. Okay, we don't want to.
Right,
So, but
5.5 million.
we have 30, and we don't want to drop below 15%.
We don't have 30, we have 12.
Percent.
Oh,
Percentage.
30%, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah.
29.7. So
But that's going
that's
down
with
quickly.
that's with round numbers.
That goes down quickly when you spend $2 million of your fund balance every year.
Is that what we're doing though?
Well, we have $1,057,000 for capital project purchases that are recommended in this budget.
I guess what I'd like to see is I'd like to see what is our fund balance, you know, because we don't have the sheet for that, for we got, everything else goes back to 2016. I'd like to see how is our fund balance, the number changing and as well as a percentage
Okay.
of the total budget.
Yep, we can do that.
And this budget uses, almost $1 million of fund balance just to balance the budget. That's on this budget summary page here.
Well, it's
Yeah, that's the 650.
it's
plus the
650
320.
carryover that we
Yeah,
use.
Plus the 320.
The one-time uses is 300, and then $1 million in capital.
Yeah, so that's what we're taking from fund balance to make this work, and then we're using all the carryover. There's another $1 million that we're carrying over for the,
And that's how we get to 12 from 11. Mhm. It's just something that I think that it's time that we spend some extra time at the beginning of the year, going over those numbers and coming up with some philosophies on how we want to address our budgets in the future.
so what is our tax rate gonna be?
Okay, so that's on this page. You asked us to come in with a 0 tax rate change, and that's what we've done. So the tax rate will be exactly the same at $10.8492. So we are, if you look at the bottom in red of that page, we are under the tax cap by $30,836, which means we'll be able to carry that over next year.
To whatever the tax, next year's
Right.
tax cap just got $30,836 higher than it otherwise.
Right. So there were, Dale was able to do some adjustments, because we hired 2 new code enforcement officers, at step 1. We were able to make those adjustments that save some money. What else did we do?
If the backhoe is approved, then we can take out the $25,000 that's in the budget for operating to lease it, rent it.
If we approve it, we're not gonna get it tomorrow. It's not like or can we?
No, we won't get it that quickly,
Right.
but, based on the timing of the year when they would actually need to use it,
Okay,
it will be fine.
okay, great.
And we left, there's 10,000 still left in the account.
Right.
But right now, we just have it, we moved it to the fund balance section on the second page of the net change sheet, for now.
And we haven't incorporated any savings from the anticipated change in healthcare
We
provider.
have not, because we still don't know what those numbers are.
It also said in year 1, regardless, even on its most optimistic, you're not going to see the effect 2019. 2020, you should, and by then you'll also know. But even on its best scenario, you're not really going to get a big benefit in this coming budget. I mean, you get some.
Yeah, we'll get some, and we're not accounting for any.
Right.
But we don't even know realistically how much that is.
That's
I-
fine.
I
We
think
don't
it's-
want to put a number to it, because we don't know, we don't have an accurate estimate, but we know there will be something. And so that allows us to feel that much more confident in what we're suggesting here, because we have unknown cushion.
And if we're not expecting the cushion from unfilled positions, then that's something that we can look at next year.
Okay.
The next page, it's just sort of the, I'll let you explain it. 'Cause you're much better at this.
where are we?
next
That's the
page.
infamous tax cap
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
calculation.
The tax cap
for
calculation.
anybody that's
The
interested.
smaller font sheet?
Yes, yes. So you can fit everything on there.
Got it.
So where it's, like it says on here, 2018 carryover, so we were allowed to carry over $264,511 that we did not use towards the 2017 tax levy that was allowed, carried over, now to, go to 19. So, 2020, we're only gonna have 30,836. That's, yeah,
Not going to help our tax cap as much as we've seen in recent years.
right, right. But we're still under, so it's good.
Yeah, it was a pretty small margin between being
Very
like
small.
reaching the tax cap and having any increase at all in the. It was a
Yes.
The other sheet that Dale handed out were all of the changes that were made, based on the conversations that the board had, regarding what they wanted to keep in or change. So that is just the, Dale's accounting of what you talked about.
Did you want to talk about? Is this the time to talk about?
Hello.
Because Stuart wasn't with us for a lot of the budget discussions, but when he got updated on what some of them were, then
I just wanted to, just one thing, and I mentioned it briefly. I understand that you have included in your budget, I guess, money for board interns as compared to an intern for my office and things like that. I just wanted to make you folks aware that the policy that you adopted earlier this year called for it to be unpaid. So, so I just want you to be aware of that, because, so your policy is this. Also, again, if you're looking at paying, you have to be very careful, Fair Labor Standards Act. You're going to be civil service situations. There's going to be a question of how long the person can work as a temper, because they could be, it may only be a 4-month period. But I just, what struck me is that your policy clearly calls it as unpaid. So you would have to amend your policy to turn it into what you would otherwise be calling it as a paid internship. So I just wanted to point that out, because
There's 3 on here. I thought there was actually, did we agree to 3?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I'm sorry, I just, since we're on record, I'm totally opposed to trustees having. I continue to be opposed to it. I have no problem with, and that's part of the reason. It feels like that's not what we discussed in the beginning of this year. I don't think that trustees should have them. I don't understand how we're going to supply office space, computers, and access, and who's managing, considering trustees don't have actual parameters around their hours. And it just doesn't feel like an intern. Now, the ones I put in are not in there that way, because I actually asked for staff, not for trustees, put interns, and I don't know if that also applies, what you just said, Stuart. I didn't ask, I asked for interns for staff as something that I would have liked to see, not, and I actually delineated that. I did not do it for trustees, so.
just talking about trustee.
Right,
Yeah.
so.
And yours are in here.
That is, yeah, I don't know where you came out, or if you just put everything that we asked in here.
Well, we put everything that you discussed, so some things came out and some things changed, and,
Okay, so it's just what we came out with at the end.
right,
$30,000?
For what?
for what?
Or what?
What, am I reading this wrong? The adopted budget for board interns, recommended 27,000, what, I must be reading this wrong. Recommended 27,000, adopted 30,000.
Hold up.
Where are you?
Board submitted changes, legislative board contractual board initiatives, 2019 board request, 3 interns.
Supposed to be $3,000, right?
I
A
think we-
1,000 each was the,
I think we have an extra digit.
should be 3, oh, well, it says here,
No,
3.
that's just the budget itself. So the change is on the right-hand side, so see the 3,000?
Okay.
To the right, because I had to do a cumulative going down to make the change to the one budget line item. So if you look, it's 176 to 169 to show the $7,000 change. So then you're starting at 169 to 165. They're all the same account. So I had, in order to have this make
So,
Yeah, okay.
so the recommended budget,
Mathematically,
so
I
the,
had to keep going
the
backwards.
recommended starts at 176, and we
Yes.
ignore the way these are all lining up until we get down to the bottom at 56, no, at $90,586 for that line
Reduction,
reduction. Okay, right, negative, okay.
because we took out the 100 and moved it to the contingency reserve. And then with all the other ads, then it was a $96,000 reduction. Adds and subtracts.
Is the arts project in here somewhere?
Yep, that's actually has its own line item in the budget.
Oh, okay.
Was there also a question about your salaries for next year?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So, did you increase the, well, what we did, as I recall, and somebody can correct me, but we increased salaries for elected officials across the board by 25%, and it hadn't been done in 14 years. And even with that 25% increase, we didn't keep up with what our salaries would have been if we had just followed along with the CSEA increases. So at the time that we upgraded the, so it's 10,000 and 15,000 for the mayor. I believe our legislation says that each year the village board may consider doing an increase consistent with the CSEA contract.
I thought it was automatic.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm like,
Because you built
we
it
had a
in.
whole discussion about
The
this.
language
Right.
is, the compensation of the trustees and mayor may be increased on an annual basis in accordance with a defined percentage to be established during the annual budget process and set forth in the annual adopted budget.
So if we had said will, then it would have been automatic, right?
Yep. This, I'm just, because
Well, this is not the right wording. Okay. After all of that discussion.
No, I think we had all that discussion and we landed here, and I'm not sure why. Were you our attorney at the time?
No.
Okay. So we might want to
There we
update
go.
we might want to update the legislation
literally
in
discussed it
2019. But is there an increase in the?
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure it's in there.
Yeah.
Because when it shows up here, it's actually hard to tell because it's not.
Right, yeah.
I suddenly thought because like
Yeah.
my salary is post.
Right.
It's not a nice flat number. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
the original schedule was just set because we did not have an agreement yet in hand when we, filed for the
Ah,
budget.
okay.
So now what I've done in the adopted budget itself is move the amounts that were placed aside in contingency out to all the respective salary lines. So you will see that when the adopted budget comes out. But
Oh.
it's a wash from one line to all the other lines.
Okay.
So there's no impact dollar-wise because it was already accounted for.
Okay.
So what are we doing with that? So is that-
It is incorporated. It's there. We're good. We may want to update the legislation to will
Yeah, I
rather
think we're
than
gonna
may.
have to, oh my God.
I'm sure there was a very good reason. And now we can find a different reason for moving forward differently. Okay,
So,
what else?
if you're okay with what we've presented to you, then this is what we'll prepare for the final budget for your consideration on the 5th.
Everybody feel good about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, what do we do with the interns, the $3,000 for the interns? Is it appropriate to leave them in there if we're not sure that we can have them, or, I mean, it's a token amount of money anyway.
Well, I mean, at this point, we just need to.
Policy, I mean, I'm more, your policy right now explicitly calls it unpaid. So you would have to, that requires.
A revision?
The other issue just to bring up is, and I've asked Tanya to look at it, because if you get into pay, you then get into civil service, you then get into, are they part of the state system? What are they entitled to? So there's a
Do they
whole-
have to be vetted and drug tested and everything?
Yeah, well, actually, yeah.
know.
Stuart, this is like the same thing. I mean, we discussed this. So, if we get camp counselors that are here for 2 months, right? So they
Not the same thing.
well, no, 'cause they're paid, so they actually do. Even our unpaid would go to our personnel department and fill out an application. They would get full background checks. I mean that was part of the conversation we had originally with the original policy. So the only difference now is updating the policy just to include paid, but really they would go through the process as any other employee. They're temporary employees, so.
Well, that's where it becomes important how you classify them. Because
Yeah.
if they're temporary, they can only work for 4 months.
Right.
And in any calendar year.
Oh, so you
you
didn't go
have
that
to,
way.
and that becomes
But
important.
they're being paid with a stipend. Does that make a difference? Because they're not being
They're
paid an
being
hourly
paid.
rate.
Yeah.
We would have to
Doesn't-
calculate the hourly rate based on the number of hours they would be working to make sure that they were meeting fair labor standards.
Well, they won't. I mean, $1,000 over 4 months is like not very many hours.
Okay, but so that's, it is what it is.
But yeah, so we
I
would.
want to be careful with that because then, New York, Westchester goes up to $13 an hour. I'm sorry, Westchester goes up to $13 an hour effective December 31st. So, and then it would be time and a half. The only thing is, because it's a municipal employee,
Yeah.
the Fair Labor Standards Act applies, but the New York labor law does not apply.
Sure does.
So,
Yeah.
one of the things that how we've defined it in the ordinance.
But yeah, so it would really only be on those who are coming, who would qualify under the paid, right? If they're a paid intern or not. And yeah, we would have to work with our HR and personnel office to make sure that those parameters are set, and and some of that, if not all, would actually be done with the school. But that all depends on the applicant. That all depends on who we end up hiring. And that's a process that's, as it's been exhaustively discussed at the board, will be done with the office of the village manager. So, thank you.
Right, but we did discuss it exhaustively, but then we set a policy that said unpaid. So is it appropriate, and again, this is not at all going to make or break our decision on the tax rate, clearly. We're talking about $3,000 or not. The question is, should it be included in the budget at this time until we have updated the policy, and we should update the policy after we've confirmed that after Stuart and Tanya have been able to provide us with the information that he's seeking.
From a legal perspective, I think we just can't spend the money on those activities.
Yeah.
From if the intent here is to find some way forward to be able to pay a small stipend to somebody to be an intern, then I think leaving it in the budget now is the appropriate thing to do, and we don't spend it until you have decided if you want to do paid interns or not.
Sounds good. Are you okay with that, Stuart?
I'm good.
Okay. Tom, are you okay with that? Thank you.
Absolutely.
All righty. We had contracts written on here. None of us are exactly sure what
I
that
don't know
was
what that
referring
was
to.
about.
Any contracts people wanted to talk about? Because we had it on the budget, I had it on the
What is that?
agenda.
I'm sorry.
I don't know anything about
I
that.
don't know what it is.
I mean, there are a bunch of contracts
No
that we'll
one
be
knows what it
voting on
is.
at the reorg meeting, but you'll forward us the information as we get closer to that date.
So when will the final adopted budget be?
Next week.
Yeah, when will it be ready?
So we'll be presenting that for your consideration on the 5th. Again, I want to take this opportunity to thank Tom and
yeah.
Dale for their exceptional work on this. Given that this is pretty much in place, I'm not going to commit to when they can have it out to you. But it'll be before the
Usually,
5th.
like, these schedules
Those will be-
are like
Those are
what's
quick.
presented for the public at the board meeting, at the legislative meeting.
Just the top line information.
Well, it's like the list of the changes from the tentative budget to become the adopted budget.
Oh, okay.
Because that's already been up
And then
there.
the schedule that,
So you just add that to the existing proposed
Well-
budget that's online. You have the proposed budget is online, anybody can look at that. And now, within tomorrow, the day after, by the end of the week, we can have, whatchamahoots, the, I'm very tired, the modifications, the changes. Okay.
It'll take the rest of
Just
the
like
year to actually
Yeah, I know.
produce a new budget document. It's a time-consuming process.
We want you to be,
Stringing together a bunch of PDF documents.
Thank you all also for the time that you took to really dig into this and ask really great questions and allow us the opportunity to explain our philosophies and thoughts on things. So I really appreciate all of your time to go through this pretty extensively.
thank you, and thank you. to
Thank
Dale.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel pretty good about this, and I'm sure we'll have some questions over the course of the week as we prepare to vote on it. But I'm glad we reached a lot of consensus on big picture policy concepts, and we're able to bring it together, maintaining a 0% tax rate increase, largely because we've done a lot of really smart, thoughtful, fiscally responsible things for years to be able to be in this position. So kudos to everybody at the table now and for a long time coming, so. Thank you. And my only regret is that we stayed a couple hours too long. on that, that day of the storm. But hindsight's 20/20. Okay.
4.5 hours to get home.
Yes, 4.5 hours from the village to the town.
Snowshoes.
My wife got home quicker and she walked from the train station.
Yeah,
Yes.
actually, people did.
Yes, yes. So do we need a motion to go into executive session for matters related to personnel, related to specific persons?
Yes.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
With that, thank you very much. Please join us at the courthouse next week, December 5th, when we will be voting on the budget, as well as other exciting items. This meeting is adjourned to executive session.